This arrogant crown prince was completely prepared to reject his obsessed fiancée and ruin her life. In the original story, he throws her away for the heroine, leading straight to her public execution. But after waking up in the doomed villainess's body, our girl refuses to play the victim. When she arrives at the palace, the annoyed prince assumes she is desperately begging for a wedding date. He sighs and starts lecturing her about his busy schedule, expecting her usual tears. So she completely shatters his massive ego by looking him dead in the eye and dumping him first. She bluntly cancels the engagement, leaving the most powerful man in the kingdom completely speechless. She walks away victorious, totally unaware that this brutal rejection is about to completely rewrite the plot. The moon hangs heavy outside the window. It has been exactly 2 weeks since she woke up here. Time really does fly when you are losing your mind. So she cannot figure out why she is still stuck in this waking nightmare. She begs the universe to let this just be a terrible coma. There is zero chance she has actually been reincarnated as a fictional villainess. Suddenly, a vicious table leg completely humbles her pinky toe. Searing agony shoots straight up her leg. Groaning on the floor, she accepts that this horrible reality is entirely real. Seriously, why is it always the pinky toe that suffers? Defeated, our girl slips on some house shoes to rethink her life. None of this makes any logical sense to her. How does a normal girl just wake up in a fantasy novel? From the outside, everything looks perfectly fine. She is currently lounging in a disgustingly lavish estate, just absolutely dripping in aristocratic wealth. But she cannot enjoy a single second of this luxury because, according to the plot, she is on a fast track to the grave. In this twisted fictional universe, she is the infamous Lucia Aurelius, the ultimate, irredeemable villainess of the story. A doomed character destined to lose absolutely everything. Her wealth, her status, all of it gone. Her royal fiancé is definitely going to dump her. Her reputation will be dragged through the mud. And to top off this miserable fate, she gets brutally murdered. She glares up at a massive portrait of the original Lucia, shouting to the empty room that she got totally scammed. Enraged, she rips a slipper right off her foot. She is a modern, independent woman who has been single her whole life. Tossing her other shoe, she screams about the sheer injustice of it all. Out of all the characters, why did she get slapped with the villain's face? Exhausted by her own tantrum, she dramatically collapses onto the sofa, wondering what cosmic crime she committed to deserve this tragic destiny. She has no idea how she got here, but she refuses to accept this script. Back in the real world, things were simple. She remembers congratulating her friend Senna on publishing this exact novel. She had a whole life and normal, non-lethal dreams. She always worked so incredibly hard. She really gave it her all back home. And what was the grand reward for all that effort? Becoming guaranteed cannon fodder in her bestie's stupid book. She furiously shakes off her despair, absolutely refusing to die. That tragic ending is simply not going to happen on her watch. Our queen is officially going rogue to save her own neck. Time to strategize and recall every single spoiler she read online. She starts scribbling down a desperate survival guide. The main plot officially kicks off at the royal engagement party. That is when the perfect, angelic heroine makes her grand debut. Luckily, she still has a few months before that disaster strikes. Her genius plan is simply to ghost all the main characters entirely. She prays the universe will not magically force her to follow the script. Considering her ongoing existential crisis was never in the book, she feels optimistic. Back to business, she tries to recall the walking red flags she needs to avoid. There is her future executioner, the knight, her 2 stepbrothers, and of course her royal fiancé, the crown prince. Avoiding 4 homicidal men should be a total breeze, right? Then reality hits her like a ton of bricks. She literally lives with her stepbrothers and is currently engaged to the prince. A massive headache sets in as her brilliant avoidance plan instantly crumbles. Defeated once again, she faceplants straight onto her desk. Ghosting them is physically impossible right now. She needs a much more aggressive strategy to survive this mess. Scanning her messy notes, the title crown prince practically glows on the page. A chaotic, brilliant idea begins brewing in her mind. The next morning dawns bright and early at the Aurelius estate. A maid carefully brushes out our girl's luxurious hair. The servant asks if she is truly well enough to visit the palace, considering she spent the last 2 weeks having a literal breakdown in bed. She assures the maid she is fine, silently praying her aristocratic accent sounds legit. Internally, she is still completely freaked out by having a personal dressing crew. Sweet Linda assumes Our Lady is just desperate to see her royal man, teasing that she must have missed His Highness terribly during her sickness, reminding her that with the engagement looming, they have wedding details to discuss. Our girl forces a polite, aristocratic laugh while her hand visibly shakes. She stares at her gorgeous, doomed reflection and agrees they have much to discuss. Today is the day she officially changes her fate. Her grand survival plan starts by dumping the prince. Now Lucia is heading to the royal palace, but she is way too stressed to enjoy the gorgeous view. This carriage ride is an absolute backbreaker. Turns out, high society life is a lot bumpier than the romance novels promised. Our girl is quickly realizing that being a storybook princess is basically an extreme sport. It is pretty ironic that her first real romantic experience is going to be a breakup. She checks out the passing town just to distract herself from the looming disaster. The carriage rattles over the cobblestones, making her wonder how anyone survives this commute. But honestly, the scenery looks exactly like a high-budget fantasy movie. For a fleeting second, she forgets she is a doomed villainess and just takes it all in. Seeing people go about their normal days really drives home that this crazy world is her reality now. She wishes she could just hop out and explore instead of riding straight toward her doom. But the palace gates are calling, and she has a date with a messy breakup. She needs to review her survival strategy before she loses her nerve. Step 1. Get to the castle without throwing up. Easy enough. Step 2. Firmly dump the prince and reclaim her freedom. But if he refuses, she could end up dead, or worse, miserably married. Suddenly, this simple plan feels like a high-stakes gamble she might actually lose. Pure panic sets in as she realizes she literally has no backup plan. She was so focused on dumping him that she forgot to account for his massive ego. And just like that, the imposing royal palace looms ahead, looking absolutely terrifying. Everything about this place screams cold power and expensive taste. Inside, the decor is exactly as stiff as the royal family itself. A maid leads her into a lavish drawing room, putting our heroine directly in the belly of the beast. The snacks look too fancy to eat, though right now she would trade them all for a ginger and spinach smoothie to settle her nerves. The maid politely informs her that Prince Alec Aurelius will be with her shortly. Now comes the absolute worst part of any breakup, the agonizing waiting period. She watches a little bird in a cage and completely relates to the poor thing. Reality is really sinking in, and her heart is doing a frantic tap dance. She grips her dress with both hands just to hide the shaking. Reclaiming your life is way more terrifying in practice than it was in theory. A sudden chirp breaks the silence, snapping her out of her doomed spiral. The tiny pink bird is officially the only friendly face in this entire fortress. She tries to convince herself that the prince will actually be relieved to lose her. But a nagging voice keeps listing all the ways this could violently blow up in her face. She reaches out to pet the bird, desperate for a tiny bit of comfort. For a brief second, its cuteness actually manages to soothe her. Deep breaths. Time to put on her best villainous poker face and get to work. The door finally swings open, ending her temporary peace. Her stomach drops as she hears that cold, familiar voice call her name. Enter Prince Alec Aurelius, looking every bit the arrogant royal he was born to be. He is wearing his signature annoyed scowl, clearly treating this visit like a chore. Lucia stares at him, fully aware that in the original story, this guy is destined to be the male lead. It is the classic setup of an obsessed villainess chasing a prince who hates her, but she is about to flip the script. Our queen plays it cool, pretending she has not been sweating through this agonizing silence. Alec kicks things off with some painfully polite small talk about her recent illness. He delivers a perfectly rehearsed noble apology, pretending he is actually sorry for ignoring her. Lucia just nods, letting him think she is still desperately clinging to his attention. She can practically see the annoyance radiating right through his royal poker face. But honestly, his complete lack of interest is exactly what she needs right now. He is so ready for this visit to end, probably assuming she wants a wedding date. The second she mentions their engagement, you can almost hear him mentally preparing a rejection speech. He cuts her off before she can even finish, sighing like her mere presence is a burden. He launches into a tired lecture about how busy he is, assuming she wants to rush the wedding. The room goes dead silent as he waits for her usual tears, but Lucia has a totally different plan. A gust of wind sweeps through the room, matching the sudden shift in power. His brain essentially short-circuits, leaving him entirely unable to form a coherent sentence. She doesn't stutter or hesitate, she just drops the bombshell that they should call the whole thing off. And just like that, our queen takes her life back, leaving the most powerful man in the kingdom completely speechless. Getting dumped by his fiancée definitely wasn't on his daily schedule. Naturally, he demands to know why she is suddenly calling it quits. Our girl stands her ground, looking completely flawless while shattering his ego. She bluntly explains that their arrangement has zero love and never will. That brutal honesty actually leaves the royal guy completely speechless. Forcing this marriage would just make everyone miserable, so she is officially done. It takes him a long moment to realize he is genuinely being tossed aside. Meanwhile, she prays he runs off to find his actual destined true love. Playing the villain in someone else's fairy tale has gotten incredibly exhausting. Awkward. Lucia loses her patience, wondering why he is taking an absolute eternity to agree. Instead of giving a straight answer, he just sits there brooding handsomely. Breaking off this engagement should literally be a dream come true for him. She is about 2 seconds away from throwing a tantrum if he ignores her. A terrifying thought crosses her mind that he might actually fight for their relationship. Thankfully, Alec finally caves in and admits that splitting up is the best move. The man is suddenly absolutely thrilled, with literal joy sparkles flying everywhere. His immediate excitement is honestly a bit much, radiating massive single energy. He quickly confirms he never wanted to marry her anyway, beaming from ear to ear. Even though this was her plan, our queen finds his sheer relief slightly insulting. He immediately starts planning a public breakup announcement at some royal picnic. Lucia stares blankly, wondering when a random picnic got added to her schedule. She brushes off the details, just relieved that this contract is finally dead. With a firm nod, she prepares to leave this royal mess behind forever. The palace might be gorgeous, but escaping its exhausting drama sounds way better. A massive weight instantly lifts off her shoulders as she strolls outside. Walking away from a wedding you never wanted is the ultimate power move. That successful cancellation definitely counts as an absolute win in my book. She feels giddy enough to burst into song, but settles for a smirk instead. To be completely honest, his eager relief still stings just a tiny bit. Taking in the palace views one last time seems like a great idea. She might as well play tourist since she never plans on stepping foot here again. One innocent little walk around the gardens couldn't possibly hurt anyone. The gorgeous weather is the perfect excuse to show off her flawless outfit. This was supposed to be a quick, drama-free detour before heading out. The sound of clashing metal leads her straight toward the training grounds. Through the trees, we spot the red-haired second prince, Leonard, getting a sweaty workout in. He is currently busy making his sparring partner look like an absolute amateur. His terrifying speed is honestly unfair to everyone else on the field. As the resident royal bad boy, Leonard is exactly what our girl should avoid. He straight up tells his opponent they are way too slow, pulling 0 punches. He swings that practice sword with the kind of cocky swagger only a prince can afford. Leonard ends the match with a single slash before it even really begins. He makes it look entirely too easy, quickly disarming the poor kid into the dirt. The wooden sword hits the ground with a clank, mercifully ending the round. The defeated knight acts completely starstruck by that sheer level of skill. Leonard gives him a quick pat on the back, playing the cool mentor. He immediately starts lecturing the rookie about the weight of real steel. A furious scream echoing across the yard rudely interrupts that fake teaching moment. The royal governess Mary marches onto the field, looking ready to breathe actual fire. The other knights step back quickly, thanking their lucky stars they aren't the targets. Watching Leonard dodge his duties is practically a daily event around here. The young knight takes the massive hint and vanishes before the yelling starts. Mary has absolutely 0 patience today, reminding him that swordplay doesn't replace studies. The red-haired prince leans in close and turns on the charm to flirt his way out. Calling her breathtakingly beautiful might have worked if she hadn't heard it a million times. She just sighs heavily, completely immune to his weaponized good looks. She actually moved his classes outside today, staying one step ahead of his hiding spots. The lecture quickly shifts to Alec's upcoming coronation and those massive royal responsibilities. Leonard looks completely bored out of his mind as she demands he take his role seriously. She drops a heavy reality check about him taking over if his brother falls. A surprisingly dark glare briefly replaces the playful prince's usual smirk. Mary remains completely unfazed, complaining about his awful friends and terrible manners. Honestly, the time he called a council member a walking raisin is pretty hilarious. Our prince mentally checks out, begging the universe for literally any distraction. Talking to a brick wall makes Mary lose her cool and scream in absolute frustration. Her eyes suddenly lock onto that dreaded snake Lucia wandering nearby. Our girl looks gorgeous and totally oblivious to the drama as she minds her own business. Leonard watches her walk by with major interest, definitely admiring the view. Mary seethes with anger, disgusted by the mere idea of Lucia marrying Alec. The governess calls the girl a total nightmare, but Leonard just can't resist poking the bear. He casually points out that she isn't Mary's fiancé anyway, radiating peak annoying brother energy. Seeing red completely blinds the governess to her student preparing a sudden escape. He bolts toward the gardens in a flash, leaving her screaming into the wind. Lucia remains completely unaware of her new stalker while soaking in the peace and quiet. The garden vibes feel amazing now that she is free from suffocating royal obligations. Everything is finally falling into place for once with the breakup handled perfectly. She wonders if the palace is just being dramatic when she hears tiny phantom meows. Her eyes lock onto a tiny life in serious peril, confirming she isn't crazy. A poor little kitten is stuck way up in a massive tree, crying its heart out. Staring at the little fluff ball reveals the poor thing is completely stranded. That cat looks down with a tragic expression, deeply regretting its life choices. Our queen weighs her options, wondering how to play hero in this massive dress. Scaling a tree in a heavy gown is literally the worst idea she has ever had. One look at that adorable face instantly melts her cold villain heart. Royal dignity gets tossed aside because saving a kitten obviously outranks keeping a dress clean. Hitching up all that pink fabric proves she is way tougher than she looks. She handles the climb surprisingly well, scaling those branches like an absolute expert. The rescue mission demands her full focus as she gets close enough to reach the little guy. The absolute worst sound imaginable echoes through the garden, right when victory is in her grasp. The branch betrays her entirely and snaps with a loud, terrifying crack. Everything switches to slow motion as the ground starts approaching very quickly. She lets out a massive scream while plummeting down in a chaotic cloud of pink ruffles. A pair of very strong arms catches her midair instead of letting her face plant. She snaps her eyes open, trying to process who just saved her from a broken neck. Prince Leonard stands there with his shirt completely open, looking like a romance novel cover. He proudly announces that he has got her, letting out a low, confident laugh. Lucia just stares up at him completely speechless, definitely distracted by all that royal muscle. This gorgeous stranger is carrying her like they are shooting a historical romance. Our girl frantically explains that she only ruined her dress to save a cat.
Judgment.
She desperately points toward the branches to prove she has not entirely lost her mind. Son of a bitch. Meanwhile, the prince leans in to ask if she plans on staying in his arms forever. He playfully teases that she must be enjoying the romantic royal carry. Our girl snaps back to reality and realizes how incredibly scandalous they look. Back on solid ground, she desperately tries to scrape her ruined dignity together. She blames her clumsy landing on the heels and hopes she can just walk away. But Leonardo notices she has not actually addressed him by his royal title. He flashes a dangerously charming smile and asks if she forgot his name. Lucia experiences a total system failure because they have literally never met. She frantically scrolls through her novel knowledge, trying to place this handsome stranger. Her mind goes completely blank as she searches for any helpful context clues. The awkward silence stretches on while she just stares at him in sheer panic. She forces out a nervous laugh that sounds painfully fake. Our queen insists she absolutely remembers him while silently begging for a miracle. She awkwardly calls him sir to hide the fact she is totally clueless. She braces herself for the absolute embarrassment of being caught in a lie. Leonardo just laughs and teases her for forgetting her own future brother-in-law. The horrifying realization hits her like a runaway carriage. This gorgeous man is none other than the Crown Prince's younger brother. Everything finally clicks into place as she recognizes Prince Leonardo Felix. This guy is famously known throughout the Empire as the terrifying Crimson Lion. In the original book, he was a ruthless general who solved problems with violence. He was basically an absolute menace on the battlefield who took no prisoners. Lucia swallows hard as she realizes how close she just came to a terrible mistake. She immediately drops into a polite curtsy, hoping her trembling legs hold up. But Leonardo gently catches her hand before she can escape his orbit. His sudden shift into formal royalty feels way more dangerous than his playful teasing. An aggressive cough from the sidelines shatters the romantic tension into a million pieces. It is Lady Mary looking entirely done with these palace shenanigans. She glares at the prince with the authority of someone ready to assign homework. Her icy greeting instantly lowers the temperature of the entire royal garden. Lucia feels herself shrinking under the deeply judgmental stare of the royal governess. Leonardo offers a terribly fake apology while clearly enjoying the drama he started. He casually assumes our girl is only here to plan her wedding with his brother. Our heroine decides this is the perfect moment to drop an absolute truth bomb. She leaves the confident prince totally speechless and scrambling for words. Lucia cheerfully announces that she just dumped the crown prince for good. She treats the broken royal engagement like she just changed her dinner plans. While Leonardo processes that massive plot twist, she takes her chance to escape. She is more than ready to leave this messy royal family behind her forever. She politely points out that they never have to see each other again. With her smartest fake smile, she promises to stay far away from the palace. Leonardo just stares at her in stunned silence as she prepares to leave. She spins around on her heels, ready to finally head home. But he grabs her hand one last time to stall her sudden departure. He calls her name with a totally serious tone that catches her off guard. The scary general actually asks if she is holding up okay after the breakup. He looks deep into her eyes with an intensity that completely flusters her. Our girl feels an extremely inappropriate flutter for her ex-fiancé younger brother. She forces her best brave smile while her heart beats out of control. She proudly promises she has never felt better about dodging her execution flag. With one final polite nod, she climbs into her waiting escape carriage. She leaves the gorgeous prince standing completely alone in the sprawling gardens. Leonardo just watches her roll away, wondering what exactly just happened to him. The carriage speeds away, carrying our queen straight toward a brand new headache. The rhythmic sound of the horses finally lets her drop her perfect lady act. She collapses into the cushions, completely exhausted from playing palace politics all day. She is so proud that her master plan worked out despite the tree incident. She cringes thinking about how ungraceful her tumbling fall must have actually looked. That landing would have ended in broken bones without a handsome prince to catch her. She admits she got incredibly lucky that Leonardo happened to be walking by. Despite his scary reputation as a monster, he was actually really sweet to her. His playful personality completely contradicts everything the original novel said about him. Lucia wonders if the author completely left out some massive character details. She seriously regrets only skimming the book for its spicy romance scenes. But she brushes it off since she already knows the important survival spoilers. Now she just needs to survive the two absolute menaces living in her house. Her adopted brothers Alexander and Theodore are basically her worst waking nightmares. Her childhood adoption into the Duke family created some major sibling resentment. The Duke completely ignored his biological sons just to spoil her rotten instead. While she got all the attention, the boys were left entirely in the shadows. They grew up emotionally starved and completely disconnected from their own father. It is honestly no wonder they absolutely despise her taking up their space. She has only faced Alexander so far since the younger brother is at boarding school. The novel called Alexander a rebel, but she cannot remember exactly why. Since he runs the estate during the Duke's absence, avoiding him is nearly impossible. But she suddenly remembers how Alexander actually saved her life when she first arrived. He was the one desperately screaming for a doctor to save his new sister. She vividly remembers the pure, unhidden terror in his eyes during that rainstorm. She shakes off the warm memories, deciding it is safer to just avoid him entirely. Our girl feels pretty confident since both brothers are rarely ever at the mansion anyway. Rolling through the gates, she is totally convinced her peaceful new life has officially begun. She sits down for a quiet dinner expecting delicious food and absolutely zero drama. Unfortunately, the universe has a hilarious way of ruining her carefully laid plans. Because sitting directly across the table is a nightmare she was not prepared for. Meet Theodore Aurelius, the younger brother, who looks deeply offended by her mere existence. The head maid awkwardly explains that Alexander is stuck in town on official business. But the real tragedy is that Theodore somehow came home from school months early. Our queen is internally screaming because this grumpy boy ruins her entire survival timeline. She just stares at her soup while her perfect stress-free plans go up in flames. The dining room is freezing cold as she attempts to blend in with the wallpaper. She desperately debates whether to say hello or stay completely invisible to this angry teenager. She finally attempts a shaky welcome home only to get completely frozen out. Theodore angrily stands up to show exactly how much he hates breathing the same air. The poor maid tries to save the dinner, but the vibe is completely dead. He shoots out a brutal glare and flatly rejects the meal to make his point. Claiming the food makes him sick, he delivers the ultimate dramatic exit line. Lucia is left sitting alone, realizing her peaceful life just hit a very angry blonde speed bump. Before storming off, the grumpy brother pauses at the door to drop one final petty demand. He makes it aggressively clear that absolutely no one is allowed to disturb him. And with a dramatic door slam, our girl is left sitting all alone. Honestly, she counts that incredibly awkward interaction as an absolute win. She happily digs into her meal, deciding his bad mood means more delicious food for her. Plus, she completely prefers Alexander's company anyway. Suddenly a light bulb goes off in her head. She specifically remembers the maid confirming that Alexander would be out late tonight. Fast forward to later that evening across the estate. A familiar hand reaches for a mysteriously delivered letter, resting on a desk. It is Alexander, staring at a note claiming our queen demanded midnight snacks to be delivered upon his arrival. He glares at the envelope, genuinely debating if she just mailed him poison. 2 entire weeks pass, bringing us to a beautifully sunny afternoon. Our girl is literally melting into the floor out of sheer boredom. She finally drags herself up, completely fed up with this ridiculous situation. She blindly stares at her book without absorbing a single word. Her brain is officially dissociating into another dimension. She finally snaps, deciding she absolutely cannot take another second of this cabin fever. She has spent 14 days hiding just to avoid awkward run-ins with the brothers. But she has now memorized literally every single speck of dust in this bedroom. She practically begs the universe to let her step foot outside. Throwing her book down, she makes a final executive decision. She is breaking out of this prison today, no matter what. Naturally, Linda the maid goes into full panic mode at the news. She frantically lists every possible danger, begging her not to leave unescorted. But our queen completely brushes off the warning, fully confident she can handle herself. Linda begs her to take a guard, terrified of the young master finding out. Lucia just waves cheerfully, declaring this their top secret mission. She cuts off the poor maid's protests with a rock-solid promise to return safely. And just like that, our girl struts out of the manor glowing like a Disney princess. She finally makes it into the bustling heart of the local town. Our girl happily wanders past the charming local architecture. She hits the market street, completely mesmerized by the massive crowds and noisy vendors. She overhears shopkeepers bragging about importing luxury fabrics from the Western Kingdom. The irresistible smell of freshly baked pastries absolutely calls her name. She stops to watch a chaotic group of kids running around, finding the scene incredibly endearing. Escaping the stuffy manor was definitely the best decision she has made all week. The vibrant energy of the town is exactly the kind of therapy she needed. It completely distracts her from the wild fact that she is trapped inside a novel. Usually, reading is an escape from reality, not the exact opposite. But watching these people live their daily lives gives her a serious reality check. To them, this isn't some fictional plotline at all. And honestly, she has to accept that this is her real life now too. Her deep thoughts are interrupted by the glorious sight of fresh fruit. The vendor enthusiastically waves her over to check out the morning strawberry harvest. Our girl practically vibrates with excitement, since strawberries are her absolute favorite. She doesn't even hesitate, ordering an entire bag of the massive juicy treats. The vendor happily hands over the goods for a totally reasonable 20 coppers. Our girl casually drops a heavy coin, asking if it covers the total. Strutting away with her snacks, she decides to treat this entire day like a luxury vacation. She just wants to be a normal tourist enjoying the sights, wishing she could snap some photos. Her next stop is a lovely little stall packed with fresh bread and gorgeous flowers. She completely empties her wallet, stocking up on every pastry she can carry. She spends the rest of the afternoon happily stuffing her face with sweet treats. Now she is wandering the streets with a giant puff of cotton candy, living her best life. But her upbeat mood shifts when she spots a disgustingly cute couple hugging nearby. Then she notices some neighborhood kids having the time of their lives playing with a dog. She watches a group of friends walking and chatting happily with their shopping. Even a passing mother and child radiate the kind of warmth that makes her heart ache. All these picture-perfect moments suddenly start bringing her mood down. She wanders off to find a quiet spot away from all the happy crowds. She parks herself on a lonely bench, just letting the hours slip away. As the sun completely sets, she finds herself sitting alone in the dark. She looks around the deserted plaza, realizing the lively town has completely gone to sleep. It is a gorgeous evening with a sky full of stars, but she can't even enjoy it. She admits that she had a really great time playing tourist today. But the quiet evening just leaves an empty feeling in her chest. She completely deflates, realizing how painfully lonely she actually is. She desperately misses her old life and everything she left behind. It definitely wasn't some glamorous fairy tale existence. But it was hers, and she suddenly misses her old school friends more than ever. She quietly wonders if there is even a way to return to her real world. Her emotional breakdown is rudely interrupted by a super creepy voice calling her beautiful. 3 shady thugs corner her, teasing that a pretty girl shouldn't be out alone in the dark. Our girl's sadness instantly turns into absolute panic. She immediately shoots up from the bench, knowing this is bad news. She tries to casually walk in the opposite direction, desperately planning her escape route. But the creepiest guy blocks her path, ignoring her firm rejections and demanding she party with them. He audaciously grabs her shoulder, completely ignoring how hard she is trying to pull away. She forcefully shoves him off, firmly telling him she is not interested. This just pisses the guy off, and he aggressively yanks her wrist, dropping the nice guy act. Our queen isn't taking that disrespect, so she immediately slaps him across the face. But the sudden movement throws off her balance, sending her stumbling backward. She completely braces herself to eat the cobblestone street. Instead of hitting the ground, 2 strong arms smoothly catch her from behind. Her brain completely flatlines as she tries to figure out what just happened. She opens her eyes to find a ridiculously handsome gray-haired guy acting as her personal cushion. She just stares blankly, internally debating if this is a knight in shining armor or another creep. The mysterious guy effortlessly pulls her back onto her feet while holding her hand. Our girl finally gets a good look at him, locking eyes in total cinematic slow motion. Awkward, the slapped thug completely ruins the romantic tension by yelling at the newcomer. He angrily demands to know what this guy thinks he's doing with his supposed woman. Our girl instantly throws the thug under the bus, telling her rescuer she has never seen these losers. She makes it violently clear that she is definitely not anyone's woman. She boldly hides behind the gray-haired guy, completely startling him with the sudden closeness. He quickly assesses the messy street harassment situation he just walked into. He firmly tightens his grip on her wrist, silently taking her side. The lead thug completely loses his temper, shouting that his patience is gone. He tries to sound threatening, but his 2 sidekicks are already sweating bullets and backing away. The entire street gang is suddenly frozen with absolute terror, because the handsome stranger is now glaring at them with pure, unfiltered murderous intent. He confidently steps in behind our girl, looking perfectly ready to send these thugs to the afterlife. And just like that, the trash takes itself out. Our girl is left breathless while her accidental savior awkwardly untangles her hair from his jacket. She lets out a massive sigh of relief. But before she can even bat her eyelashes in gratitude, the mysterious hunk has completely vanished. Turns out he is already speedwalking away like he has somewhere infinitely better to be. He pauses for just a second, confident that those creeps are gone for good. He takes one last look around to make absolutely sure the coast is clear, only for our girl to pop out from around the corner yelling for him to wait up. Clearly ignoring her, he goes right back to his dramatic exit. But she is not letting this handsome stranger get away that easily. The faster she chases, the faster he power walks in the opposite direction. She practically has to sprint just to keep up with his ridiculously long legs. By the time she finally catches him, she is absolutely gasping for air. She manages to choke out a massive thank you for saving her life. Our boy just stands there giving her the silent treatment, before bluntly stating that he literally did nothing to help her. Talk about an absolute ice king. She freezes, totally thrown off by his ridiculous levels of emotional detachment, because she definitely remembers him stepping in. Wait a minute. Now that she really thinks about it, did he actually throw a single punch? Her jaw practically drops. He literally just stood there looking intimidating while the thugs cowered out. He really is incredibly terrifying. And yet our queen feels completely safe in his massive shadow. Meanwhile, he is silently praying that she stops following him into the dark woods. Undeterred, she completely ignores social cues and casually asks if he is an official knight. He grumbles that he is not one yet, sparking her curiosity even more. That question finally gets him to stop. He looks down at her like she has completely lost her mind, wondering how someone so clueless has managed to survive this long. But he still gives her a grumpy confirmation anyway, adding that he only wants the job because it pays incredibly well. Honestly, he is baffled that a wealthy girl is casually following a giant stranger through a dangerous forest. But our girl is only focusing on one beautiful detail right now. Lucia happens to be absolutely loaded, and she is currently in desperate need of a big scary bodyguard to keep her alive. The light bulb goes off, and she immediately sprints back after him, completely ignoring the fact that they are in pitch black woods. The forest is getting deeper and way more creepy. Suddenly he stops dead in his tracks, realizing he absolutely cannot leave a defenseless noblewoman out here to become wolf food. He sighs and turns around to offer her an escort home, only to completely jump out of his skin, while a wild animal rustles loudly in the bushes nearby. Spooked by the noise, our girl barrels right into his chest like a cannonball. She practically tackles the poor guy, sending them both crashing to the dirt in the most romantic tactical takedown ever. He groans in pain, sarcastically noting her clumsiness as she apologizes. But she ignores the awkwardness entirely, locking eyes to confirm his career goals, before straight up asking this total stranger to be her personal knight. He glares up at her and asks what her problem is. Still straddling him in the dirt, our girl casually offers to quadruple his future salary if he works for her instead. That ridiculous offer completely wipes the annoyance right off his face. He gently pushes her off and scrambles to his feet. Suddenly taking this very seriously, he asks her to confirm the math. Our queen laughs, sealing the deal with free room and board before offering a hand to pull him up. Flashing a brilliant smile, she confidently tells her new employee to follow her back to the office. Hooked by the cash, the big guy falls right into step behind her. Except our girl immediately spins around, realizing she has absolutely no idea which way is home. He just shrugs and turns around to follow her majestic new path, only for her to confidently march in the complete opposite direction again, leaving him questioning his life choices. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, someone is completely losing their mind. Her sweet green-haired brother Alexander is absolutely panicking over her disappearance. The terrified maid explains that the lady of the house secretly wandered off into town this morning. Alexander cannot wrap his head around why his introverted sister would ever willingly leave the estate. The poor maid admits she tried to force a carriage on her, but our girl insisted on flying solo. While the maid begs for forgiveness, her blonde brother is just trying to read his book in peace. Theodore finally snaps his novel shut, thoroughly annoyed by all the frantic yelling. He bluntly reminds everyone that their sister is not going to just drop dead from walking outside. Alexander instantly turns his panic into pure sibling rage. He scolds Theodore for being so incredibly insensitive about her safety, especially since they have a very important royal guest sitting right there in the room. The prince sits perfectly still, realizing she kept their little breakup a total secret. Trying to take control, Alexander orders the staff to go check her bedroom one more time. Once the maid scurries away, the three men are left marinating in the awkward silence. The prince smirks to himself, thinking she hid the truth on purpose. His massive ego decides she is just stalling the annulment because she is still hopelessly obsessed with him. He sits there plotting his next move, completely unaware that our girl has just arrived at the doorway. She steps into the tension and casually calls out for her older brother. Both siblings freeze at the sound of her voice, while her royal ex-fiancé just acts like he owns the sofa. Alexander sprints across the room, shouting her name like she just returned from war. He firmly grabs her by the shoulders, demanding to know where she has been. He starts frantically inspecting her for imaginary wounds. Our girl is genuinely stunned to realize this brother actually cares about her well-being. But while Alexander gives his protective older brother speech, a massive shadow steps into the room. Theodore watches in pure shock as the towering gray-haired knight casually bypasses him. The entire room feels the temperature drop as this giant stranger locks onto his target. Alexander is too busy scolding his sister about the dangerous streets to notice the absolute unit approaching from behind. Without a single word, the knight grips Alexander's wrist and yanks his hand right off our girl's shoulder. The green-haired brother freezes, completely terrified by this sudden physical threat. Even the arrogant prince visibly flinches from across the room. The knight smoothly pulls our girl backward, claiming her completely into his personal space. Even she is caught off guard by his intensely protective reflexes. Theodore just stares at the scene, trying to process where this handsome monster came from. The prince is completely muted by the sheer size of his new competition. The big guy basically wraps her in a protective half-hug, ready to fight her entire family. The Royal X just watches the display, totally failing to comprehend the vibe shift. Alexander stands frozen in place, trying to figure out if he is about to be murdered in his own living room. Breaking the insane tension, the brother nervously points at the giant and asks who he is. Our girl just flashes a brilliant, chaotic smile, cheerfully introducing this terrifying wall of muscle as her brand new personal guard. She has basically just moved her ultimate power piece right onto the board. She softly pats the knight's arm, silently telling him to stand down. Stepping slightly forward, she finally addresses her utterly confused sibling. She formally introduces her sweet brother to the scariest man in the kingdom. But before they can bond, an incredibly annoying voice interrupts the moment. The prince struts forward, deeply offended by the sight of another man guarding his supposed fiancé. Our girl absolutely panics, finally noticing that her toxic Royal X is just hanging out in her house. Our girl stares at her Royal X, internally screaming over his terrible timing. Forcing a polite smile, she greets His Highness, before bluntly asking what on earth he is doing in her living room. Alexander just watches the tension, completely lost in the sauce. Completely ignoring her question, the prince demands to know if this giant is actually her knight. Our girl mentally rolls her eyes at his classic arrogant deflection, but she confidently confirms it, turning to introduce her new bodyguard to the royal pain. The prince absolutely has to interrupt, loudly announcing his own full royal title. Our queen looks at him like he just tracked mud onto her favorite rug. Even the giant mercenary can feel the incredibly toxic vibes radiating off these two. The prince raises an eyebrow, suspiciously noting she never mentioned hiring protection before. He sarcastically assumes she must be deeply familiar with this total stranger's skills. She clears her throat and confidently lies straight to his face. She boldly claims they go way back, despite literally just meeting him in the dirt. Her massive new bodyguard just mentally laughs, knowing she does not even know his name. But honestly, he is already highly entertained by her absolute audacity. The prince glares at the massive wall of muscle standing between him and his ex, deciding to completely change his tactics. He steps uncomfortably close and suggests a private stroll through the gardens. She panics internally, wondering why he suddenly wants alone time. The prince immediately dismisses her older brother, promising to chat another day. Then he turns back to our girl, offering his hand like a true gentleman. She completely ignores his hand and just casually walks past him toward the door. They march right past Theodore on their way out to the garden. The blonde brother narrows his eyes, clearly sensing some incredibly messy drama brewing. Suddenly, our girl stops dead in her tracks. She spins around and casually calls out to her terrifying new employee. The big guy stands at attention, fully expecting his first official bodyguard order. She cheerfully tells him to just stay inside and bond with her incredibly fragile brothers. The three men just stand there, absolutely terrified by the concept of bonding, leaving the living room suffocating in the most awkward silence in human history. Meanwhile, the royal X's make their way out into the dark gardens. They slowly stroll through the perfectly manicured bushes. The prince looks like he is finally gearing up to confess something important. Our girl braces herself for whatever toxic nonsense is about to leave his mouth, but the absolute fool says absolutely nothing. 15 agonizing minutes pass with nothing but the sounds of crickets chirping. She is losing her mind, wondering if dragging her out here was psychological torture. The silence gets so loud she decides she has to be the bigger person. Her brain frantically scrolls through the most pathetic small talk options available. She finally settles on commenting about the lovely evening weather. But right on cue, a freezing gale force wind completely destroys her perfect icebreaker. The temperature drops so fast she practically expects a penguin to waddle past. She mentally curses the universe for ruining the one nice thing about this miserable walk. The prince finally breaks his brooding silence to glance her way. He catches her violently shaking from the freezing wind. Without a single word of warning, he closes the distance between them. She freezes in place, completely baffled by his sudden approach. In a ridiculously dramatic gesture, he sweeps his heavy royal cloak off his shoulders. and gently drapes it right over our freezing queen. They lock eyes for a heavy moment under the warmth of his fancy jacket. He bluntly points out that she is obviously freezing, before firmly ordering her to go back inside where it is warm. She just stares at him, totally short-circuiting over this unexpected gentleman routine. He vaguely promises to finish their conversation later while she is still buffering. He casually wishes her a good night and just confidently walks away. What the fuck? Left alone by the garden fountain, our girl is completely baffled. She has absolutely no idea why her toxic ex even showed up today, let alone why he was acting so completely out of character. Distracted by the royal drama, she walks face first into a solid wall. She rubs her aching forehead. She realizes that Tree is actually her massive new bodyguard. Startled, she asks why on earth he is lurking in the dark garden. He smoothly replies that it is his literal job to follow his lady everywhere. That insanely loyal answer instantly puts a massive, goofy smile on her face. Realizing her manners are terrible, she formally introduces herself and double-checks his name. The giant explains his name is Just Noah. Unable to resist, she hits him with a terrible dad joke, calling him Sir Just Noah. The immediate internal cringe is physically painful as she deeply regrets opening her mouth. But while she mentally scolds herself, a tiny amused smile actually breaks through his tough exterior. He quickly changes the subject, teasing her about that massive lie she told the prince. Catching his playful expression, she realizes he actually has a great sense of humor. She apologizes for making him her fake childhood bestie on the spot. Changing the subject, she promises to have the butler set up his fancy new bedroom. Another freezing gust of wind interrupts them, making her shiver violently again. Without a word, Noah casually drapes his heavy coat right over the prince's royal cloak. She blinks at the massive jacket swallowing her whole, completely overwhelmed by the sudden care. She decides quadrupling this guy's salary was the best investment she has ever made. The very next morning, the household is already buzzing with royal gossip. Linda happily tracks our girl down in the sunny garden with some major news. The highly anticipated official invitation for the Grand Royal Picnic has finally arrived. Lucia stares at the fancy envelope, knowing exactly what this event actually means. While her maid excitedly rambles about dress fittings, our queen is mentally preparing for freedom. Linda completely assumes the prince is going to be helplessly drooling over her gorgeous outfit. It is almost sad that the staff has no idea this picnic is actually a scheduled breakup. The prince absolutely despises her, and she honestly cannot wait for him to drop the axe. Plus, getting publicly dumped really does not sting that much anymore. Not when she has absolute eye candy standing right behind her. Her incredibly loyal, ridiculously handsome new personal knight. He has been guarding her for a few weeks now, strictly playing the strong, silent type. She still has zero clue how proper knights operate, but he makes an incredible bodyguard. Having a human mountain trailing her every move makes her feel completely untouchable. And considering how clumsy she is, it's very convenient having someone to constantly catch her. Her peaceful daydreaming is rudely interrupted by a sudden, harsh breeze. The wind violently snatches her delicate hair ribbon right off her head. The flying accessory sails straight toward the absolute worst person in the manor. Lucia gasps, reaching out helplessly as her ribbon flutters away. Her grumpy, emotionally unavailable brother Theodore snatches it right out of the air. Linda immediately switches into polite customer service mode, cheerfully greeting the terrifying young master. She bravely invites the eternally annoyed blonde to join their lovely outdoor tea party. Sweating under his intense glare, she desperately tries to defuse the situation. She nervously echoes the tea invitation, hoping a warm beverage will prevent a family meltdown. Theodore looks at her like she just offered him a warm mug of literal garbage. He violently crushes the innocent little ribbon right in his fist and tosses it into the dirt, aggressively asking why on earth he would ever drink tea with her. Being the absolute drama queen he is, he yells that just looking at her makes him physically sick. Our girl just stares down at her ruined ribbon, completely lost for words. The brutal, uncalled-for rejection actually stings way more than she expected. As she silently swallows the hurt, Noah watches the whole heartbreaking scene from the shadows. The local wildlife starts absolutely panicking as the mood completely tanks. Her maid quickly steps in to break the tension, suggesting they retreat inside before the sky opens up. Our queen sadly agrees and heads back to the manor, totally forgetting her discarded hair accessory. But her massive new shadow stays behind to quietly rescue the trampled ribbon. He stares down at the crushed silk, putting together just how awful her family really is. A rare wave of actual pity washes over the giant mercenary. He softly glances over his shoulder to check on his deeply depressed new boss. Watching her sadly trudge back to the house makes him feel weirdly protective. He carefully tucks the little ribbon away in his pocket for safekeeping. Then he dutifully follows his tragic employer back inside like a very loyal, highly lethal guard dog. Safely inside, Theodore broods by his fancy office window like a proper gothic villain. His brain is completely frying trying to figure out his sister's sudden personality transplant. He is insanely suspicious about her randomly dragging a massive mercenary into the house, especially since the old Lucia used to throw massive temper tantrums whenever their dad suggested a bodyguard. He furiously wonders what kind of manipulative, twisted game she is playing now. Turning back to his desk, he decides this whole sweet sister act is complete garbage. He firmly believes that toxic people do not just magically wake up as saints, and his deeply awful sister is absolutely no exception to that rule. He is totally convinced she is plotting something evil, right as a carrier bird violently interrupts his brooding. The extremely majestic pigeon drops a heavy piece of mail straight onto his desk. Theodore glares at the poor bird, completely exhausted by the constant dramatic interruptions. He angrily snatches the parchment, wondering what idiot is sending mail in the middle of a storm. Seeing his sister's wax seal, his annoyance immediately skyrockets through the roof. He rolls his eyes, wondering why she is using the postal service when she literally lives one door down. But the second he reads the first line, all the color instantly drains from his face. His smug arrogance completely vanishes, leaving him looking like he just saw a ghost. His fingers go totally numb, letting the heavy parchment slip right out of his hands. The dramatic letter slowly flutters down to the fancy, expensive rug. He stays absolutely frozen in pure, unadulterated shock, because the delayed letter casually mentions how distressed the family must be since she went missing weeks ago. Theodore begins reading the most unhinged piece of mail he has ever received. It starts innocently enough, detailing her supposedly lovely trip to visit the crown prince. But the carriage apparently took a massive detour and never actually reached the palace. Instead, the real Lucia was aggressively kidnapped by some greedy human traffickers. She details her absolute terror during the endless kidnapping journey. She was dragged for days across the continent entirely against her will. They eventually dumped her all the way up in the freezing northern territories. She bravely made a desperate, barefoot sprint for freedom right through the deep snow. Against all odds, she managed to completely lose her awful captors in the wilderness. But running barefoot through a literal blizzard is obviously a terrible survival strategy. Her body completely gave out from the sheer exhaustion and freezing temperatures. Right as she was fully prepared to freeze to death in the snow, a random handsome stranger suddenly stepped right into the picture. Enter Aaron, the absolute savior of this entire dramatic story. This mystery man scooped her up and carried her to his hidden woodland cabin. He brought her into a wonderfully warm and cozy little sanctuary. He gently bandaged her ruined ankles, strictly ordering her to stay in bed and rest. He softly promised she was finally safe from any more terrifying kidnappers. She raves about how this absolute green flag carried her outside just to see the northern lights. He showed off the gorgeous glowing sky, trying to give her a magical moment. But she was way too busy getting hopelessly flustered by his extremely handsome face. The memory smoothly transitions into a sweet montage of absolute domestic bliss. He nursed her back to health with ridiculous amounts of gentle care. He was just genuinely, unproblematically kind to her every single day. He showered her with the exact affection she desperately needed. He basically thawed out her frozen, deeply traumatized little heart. He showed her how wonderful a quiet, simple life could actually be. And obviously, our girl completely and totally fell in love with him. This sweet mountain man easily became her entire world. She firmly decided he was the only man she ever wanted to be with. So they casually tied the knot and exchanged shiny new wedding rings. She happily orders her family to cancel her royal engagement before wishing them goodbye. Theodore stares blankly at the parchment, his brain completely short-circuiting. He genuinely cannot process the absolute madness he just read. He stands totally frozen, gripping the letter like a live grenade. His immediate reaction is to aggressively assume this is some elaborate, stupid prank. But a horrifying realization starts creeping into the back of his mind. The old Lucia was famously miserable and completely lacked any sense of humor. Plus, nobody could perfectly forge her impossibly fancy, highly trained calligraphy. His entire worldview shatters as he accepts the letter as actually genuine. If his real sister is happily married and living in a northern cabin, then a massive, dramatically timed lightning strike highlights his terrifying final question. Who on earth is the absolute stranger currently drinking tea downstairs? Meanwhile, our fake Lucia is happily journaling about her mostly successful day. She celebrates the fact that her messy royal breakup is officially right on schedule. But her sweet brother Theodore is still looking at her like she is literal trash. She flips her blanket in frustration, totally exhausted by his hostile attitude. Honestly, she can barely even blame the guy for being a total jerk. Theodore genuinely despised the original villainess of this absolute mess of a story. And the poor guy has absolutely no idea. He is completely misdirecting his anger. because he is currently bullying a completely different, much nicer person. Keeping this massive secret is starting to get seriously exhausting. Suddenly, her stomach loudly interrupts her dramatic internal monologue. She desperately needs a massive sugar rush to cope with this family drama. While she sneaks out for snacks, Theodore is having a full-blown existential crisis. Staring at the real Lucia's letter, he desperately searches for a logical explanation. None of this insane imposter math is adding up in his genius brain. His awful sister was literally destined to become the future queen of the empire. Swapping her out for a perfect lookalike is the ultimate political power move. His paranoid brain starts connecting some very terrifying dots. If this letter is real, that kidnapping was definitely an inside job. Realizing they are living with a complete stranger, he scrambles for his coat to warn Alexander. He aggressively yanks his heavy office doors wide open. He is entirely convinced this fake sister is a highly dangerous political assassin. But he nearly jumps out of his skin right in the dark hallway. His supposed deadly assassin is standing right there holding an adorable mugs of hot cocoa. She completely freezes like a terrified deer caught in the headlights. The absolute silence in the hallway is physically painful to endure. Theodore stares at her face, mind blown that she is a flawless genetic carbon copy. She nervously babbles about the nice weather, awkwardly offering him her cup. He is absolutely fascinated by how deeply pathetic and polite this imposter acts. Meanwhile, she is internally screaming for offering a warm drink to her biggest hater. Desperate to escape, she gently places the mug down and tries to back away. But Theodore realizes this is the absolute perfect moment to test his crazy theory. He silently takes a very intimidating step right into her personal space. She panics, fully expecting him to aggressively dump the hot cocoa on her head. Instead, he just stares down at her with a terrifyingly intense look. She nervously stammers, trying to figure out what awful thing he is about to do. Without a single warning, he pulls her into a tight, incredibly awkward embrace. Our girl practically stops breathing, absolutely paralyzed by the sudden physical contact. But this is not brotherly love, it is a full-blown undercover inspection. He feels her shoulder blades, instantly realizing she is missing a very specific childhood scar. The final, undeniable piece of the puzzle clicks right into place. This sweet, cocoa-drinking girl is completely 100% fake. Having confirmed his crazy theory, he immediately tries to pull away from the hug. But our girl happily squeezes him right back, trapping him in her arms. She completely misreads the room and totally commits to the wholesome family bonding moment. Theodore violently short-circuits, completely helpless against the aggressive affection. He genuinely has no idea how to defend himself against a literal bear hug. She skips away entirely convinced her grumpy brother just secretly needed a sweet cuddle. Leaving behind her peace-offering cocoa, she heads off feeling incredibly accomplished. Theodore is left completely frozen in the hallway, absolutely traumatized by the pure kindness. Meanwhile, our girl is strolling down the hallway. She stops, noticing something familiar. Her missing ribbon is tied perfectly to her door. She smiles, touched that someone even tied it into a cute little bow. She admires the fresh ribbon, instantly knowing who to thank. Honestly, that sweet servant Linda is an absolute angel. If only she knew who really did it. Down the hall, the vibe is a little different. We cut over to Noah's quarters. Our boy is freshly showered and completely lost in thought. He flops onto the edge of his bed with a heavy sigh. He knows she doesn't remember him, and he really needs to confess soon. But the sheer dread of making things awkward is making him stall. Because before he landed this sweet gig, his life was absolute misery. We get a tragic flashback to his days as a literal roof repairman. His horrible boss was constantly barking at him to work faster. He was treated less like a human and more like a pack mule. And poor Noah just had to take it with a polite nod. The other workers clearly loved bossing him around too. Before a guy even finished complaining, Noah was already fixing the chimney. He kept up the customer service voice, but his eyes were screaming. Then it was straight to chopping firewood before the evening rain hit. Once again, our boy had absolutely zero choice but to obey. Later that rainy night, he wandered the streets completely alone. His luxurious evening routine involved freezing in a public lake. He grumbled about the terrible weather while washing off a hard day's work. But the gloomy water triggered a very specific memory for him. He just hoped that the girl he met at this exact lake was safe. Jumping to another exhausting day of endless chores for his boss, he was back to his absolute favorite hobby, aggressively chopping wood. Chop, 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 the manual labor just never seemed to end. Our handsome knight was seriously running on fumes here. Finally, he got a tiny moment to breathe. Sitting out by his employer's garden, he hung out with a stray pup. He gave the very good boy some much-needed head pats. He did the depressing math, wondering if he would ever save enough money. With prices too high, the damp woods were his bedroom again tonight. But amidst the struggle, his mind drifted back to his favorite subject. He couldn't deny it, he really wanted to see our girl again. He just wished he knew where to even start looking. Fast forward a couple of grueling weeks. The bustling town square was absolutely packed with people. A lively outdoor market was in full swing, making a total racket. Couples were out having cute little dates while Noah worked. Children were darting all around the busy merchant stalls. Suddenly, one tiny girl tripped mid-sprint. Before she could faceplant, a quick hand shot out. Noah caught her in midair, saving the day with superhero reflexes. He gently checked on the startled kid, asking if she was hurt. She rubbed her teary eyes and politely thanked the scary-looking stranger, before immediately sprinting away to go yell at her actual brother. Noah just stood there feeling slightly awkward, deciding he had no time for cute moments with all this labor to do. It was right back to the endless daily grind. Working late into the chilly evening, heavy coat and all. Carrying a massive bucket, he asked his boss for his next order. His boss finally told him to drop it in the kitchen and clock out. The sun was completely gone by this point. Noah was absolutely ready to drop dead from exhaustion. He was just thrilled to be sleeping under a real roof for once. But on his quiet walk through the dark alleys, he overheard a very sketchy group of thugs harassing someone. Peeking from a distance, he took in the dangerous situation. Then he saw that unforgettable face aggressively rejecting the creeps. His eyes went wide, realizing it was the exact girl he'd been searching for. His exhaustion instantly vanished, replaced by pure, protective rage. There was absolutely zero hesitation about stepping in to help our girl, and that heroic beatdown was the story of their fateful reunion. Snapping back to the present, Noah groans, unsure how to explain all this. He completely missed the window to confess, and now it's just getting weird. If he brings it up now, he's terrified she'll think he's a total stalker, and he desperately needs this high-paying gig to avoid roof repairing ever again. For a nameless guy like him, landing a night position was basically a miracle. He trained his entire life just to escape absolute poverty. Plus, being our girl's personal shadow is literally the easiest money ever. He fondly remembers her sweetly offering him a piece of cake in the garden. The memory makes a goofy, lovesick smile creep onto his face. He realizes she is just so genuinely kind, and he is totally smitten. He aggressively rubs his face, frustrated by his own massive crush. He really just wants to keep this job, he sighs, staring at the ceiling. Meanwhile, halfway across the estate, the mood is much lighter. Our girl is cozy in bed, furiously journaling about the day's drama. She is still reeling from Theo's unexpectedly soft behavior earlier. His sudden mood swing from absolute trash to kind of okay is definitely suspicious. She writes it off as moody teenager hormones, thrilled she got a hug out of it. She figures her hot cocoa just magically melted his icy heart. Girl, if only you knew. The ribbon smells divine. She can't help but praise Linda for her skills. As the storm rages on, Theodore holds the warm mug and takes a sip. The scene shifts to a gorgeous, sunny new day. We arrive at an obscenely fancy boutique complete with indoor fountains. Our girl wanders into this high-end fashion paradise. The boutique owner instantly leaps up to greet her VIP. She absolutely gushes over seeing her favorite, highest-paying customer again. She warmly asks how Lady Lucia has been holding up. The designer mentions hearing about the accident, asking if she is fully recovered. Our girl just slaps on a painfully awkward smile and nods. Relieved, she launches into an intense monologue about the upcoming social season wardrobe. She gives a cheeky wink, specifically hyping up the royal wedding dress. Our girl instantly breaks out into a cold sweat. The designer calls it her absolute masterpiece, dying for the world to see it. The guilt is physically crushing our girl, especially about the hand-stitched veil. The poor woman literally rejected other wealthy clients just to prioritize this doomed wardrobe. The guilt meter officially breaks as she feels like an absolute monster. Luckily, her sweet servant Linda swoops in to save the day. She flatters the designer, emphasizing how crucial this upcoming annual picnic is. Our girl mentally praises her maid for being an absolute lifesaver. Apparently, this picnic is the biggest networking event of the noble calendar. It is basically a hunting ground for business deals and elite gossip, or a prime spot for arranged marriages, which totally explains why this skipped the novel. Or maybe she just skimmed that chapter, which is deeply annoying right now. The shop owner gently sets her tiny dog down to chat. She playfully admits she is just kissing up to the future queen. Our girl tries on a ridiculously extravagant red gown, baffled that this is for a picnic. The sweet servant calls it her usual style, revealing original Lucia was insanely extra. But the designer suddenly stops in her tracks. She dramatically declares that something is completely wrong here. The tailoring is flawless, but the vibe is completely off. She realizes her client is acting totally different, which mildly panics our girl. The designer completely vetoes the extravagant red look. She snaps her fingers, summoning for assistance, carrying an absolute mountain of new options. She probably announces she has way more designs prepared for her VIP. Our girl is totally overwhelmed by this insane level of customer service. She is genuinely touched by how much this lady cares. The owner dismisses her male assistants back out into the hallway. As they leave, the guys instantly start gossiping about how incredibly gorgeous our girl is. Noah is standing right there, quietly listening to them drool over his boss. And our stoic knight is internally fuming with jealousy. The fanboys finally leave him alone in the hallway. He stares at the entrance with a heavy sigh. He grumbles about people having zero manners and leaving doors wide open, just as he is about to pull the handle. He cannot resist sneaking one tiny little peek inside. His eyes land on our girl, and his brain completely short-circuits. Seeing her in that stunning red dress absolutely wrecks him. He is totally paralyzed by how gorgeous she looks. He aggressively slams the door shut before he completely loses his mind. He stands out in the hall, absolutely fighting for his life. His hand is still glued to the doorknob, literally shaking. He takes a massive, shaky breath to lock it back in, but a massive, goofy smile breaks through anyway. Our tough guy is blushing so hard he is practically glowing red. He glances down to make sure nobody saw that pathetic display.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di torno girano, delle belle turbate.
The little dog happily trots back inside to judge someone else. Back in the dressing room, Linda is helping unlace the heavy gown, but she suddenly gasps, staring wide-eyed at our girl's bare back. Linda stammers out that something is completely missing. She reveals that a massive scar has just magically vanished. Our girl completely panics, having absolutely no idea what scar she is talking about. Linda stares at the flawless skin, completely baffled that she somehow missed this apparent miracle. She cheerfully decides that some fancy herbal lotion they bought must have actually done the trick. Our girl mentally wipes a cold sweat, having absolutely zero clue what this magical skincare routine is. Apparently, some local herbalist sells top-tier creams that can literally erase traumatic tissue damage overnight. The sweet servant is just thrilled that this mysterious, massive injury has vanished without a trace. The designer claps her hands, excitedly declaring that her absolute favorite muse can finally wear an updo. Because obviously, a gorgeous new hairstyle demands an entirely new, ridiculously expensive gown to match. Meanwhile, our fake Villainess is internally screaming because the stupid novel completely skipped over original Lucia having a giant scar. She breathes a massive sigh of relief, thanking her lucky stars that Linda's delusion just saved her from being exposed as a total fraud. Back at the estate, the vibe is significantly less glamorous. Her older brother Alexander is aggressively checking his pocket watch. He complains they are running insanely late and decides to just abandon our girl entirely. Though he does find it weird, since his little sister is usually incredibly punctual. He throws an arm around younger brother Theodore, trying to force some awkward sibling bonding, but the perpetually grumpy brat gives absolutely zero reaction. Alexander awkwardly drops his arm, wondering if the kid is broken. Theodore just lets out a sickly cough and fiercely brushes him off. He rudely demands they get this stupid carriage moving already. Alexander is left standing there, completely baffled by his brother's aggressively weird mood. Meanwhile, the inside of the mansion is currently a total circus of panicked maids. Linda is having a minor heart attack, realizing the brothers ditched them. A frantic maid confirms they left a backup carriage waiting for the notoriously late lady. Linda snaps into drill sergeant mode, ordering the carriage to the back door immediately. The staff scatters like terrified mice to execute her desperate orders. Completely oblivious to the chaos, the designer is casually sipping a strawberry cocktail. Linda stresses out, realizing our girl is about to miss the biggest event of the year. The designer's very exhausted butler tries to intervene on behalf of everyone's sanity. He bluntly informs his eccentric boss that they are astronomically behind schedule. He practically begs to know when this endless fashion show will finally wrap up. The stylist takes a dramatic pause, refusing to be bullied by the concept of time. She informs her butler that true art simply cannot be rushed for something as silly as a schedule. Every single ruffle and seam requires absolute, maddening perfection. Her butler aggressively clenches his teeth, begging her to perfect things at double speed. Sometime later, the masterpiece is finally complete. Linda practically shoves our girl out the door toward the waiting carriage. But our girl suddenly halts, struck by that nagging feeling of leaving the stove on. The designer sprints out the door, screaming that she forgot the most vital accessory. She slaps a dramatically vibrant scarf on her, guaranteeing it will hypnotize the prince. Linda assures her she is fully packed and looking absolutely devastating. Looking at these two stressed-out women, our girl has a tiny emotional revelation. She realizes this staff actually genuinely cares about her well-being. And with that surprisingly wholesome thought, the carriage finally takes off. Bouncing along the road to the palace, she falls deep into thought. Original Lucia might have been a complete menace to the main cast, but her staff actually liked her. It makes her wonder if the novel completely exaggerated how evil she truly was. But honestly, none of that matters since she plans to vanish after today's royal announcement. She just needs to survive this toxic royal drama and plot her grand escape. Meanwhile, she still can't shake that horrible feeling of forgetting a very specific, handsome object. Back at the mansion, our poor stoic knight is wandering the halls like a lost puppy.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
A gaggle of maids is huddled nearby, absolutely drooling over his rugged good looks. He politely ruins their thirst session by asking a very important question: if they have any idea where his boss went. They happily chirp that Lady Lucia already left 20 minutes ago without him. They add that she took forever getting glammed up for a very special reason. Because obviously, a girl wants to look absolutely flawless for her royal fiancé. The maids giggle about how desperate she must be to see her man after so long. Our poor boy looks like he just took a physical punch straight to the gut. The word fiancé echoes in his head, completely shattering his little love-struck heart. Back on the road, our girl's luck officially runs out when the carriage violently breaks down. She optimistically asks how far the royal villa is, fully prepared to hike in her heels. Her driver immediately shoots that down, warning her about the local bandit and bear populations. The poor guy is absolutely kicking himself for stranding his favorite noble in the wilderness. She slaps on her best customer service smile and assures him it is totally fine. The driver is just relieved his scary boss is taking the delay so well. But on the inside, she is completely spiraling over this absolute disaster. Stranded in the murder woods, she is terrified of missing her own highly anticipated breakup. Mid-panic attack, a horrifying realization completely stops her train of thought. She finally remembers the dangerously handsome knight she left back at the mansion. She mentally facepalms, wondering how she managed to forget an entire human being. She pictures poor Noah waiting out front like a tragic, abandoned puppy. Panic sets in as she wonders if this massive insult will make him quit on the spot. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out to the nervous carriage driver. Noah arrives on a majestic white steed, looking like an actual fairy tale hero. He hops off the horse, all business, demanding a quick situation report. The panicked driver begs the knight to guard their lady while he runs for help. Hearing about the crash, Noah completely ignores the driver's rambling. His only concern is whether our girl got hurt in the accident. He spins around to check on her, only to be completely blinded by her flawless outfit. She practically throws herself toward him, just thrilled to be rescued. She flashes him a dazzling smile, overwhelmingly relieved that he actually showed up. Our stoic boy instantly forgets how to breathe, totally mesmerized by her beauty. Switching back into professional mode, he quickly checks her for any injuries. She avoids eye contact, aggressively guilty about ditching him earlier. She immediately confesses her crime and begs for forgiveness. She frantically trauma dumps her entire chaotic morning and her absolute dread of the bandit woods. She is just incredibly sorry for being the absolute worst boss ever. Noah patiently stands there, letting her ramble through her adorable apology tour. She desperately needs to make this event, terrified the prince will cancel the annulment. Without a single word, Noah calmly slides his leather gloves off. He firmly grabs our totally oblivious girl right by the waist. She freezes up, completely baffled by what her bodyguard is doing. He effortlessly hoists her up onto his massive horse like she weighs absolutely nothing. He looks up at her with complete, unbothered confidence. Flashing a gorgeous smile, he promises to get her to the palace right on schedule. She is still recovering from the sheer shock of being manhandled so gently. Riding off together, they both have matching, goofy smiles plastered on their faces. She decides that traveling by night in shining armor is definitely a vibe. Having never ridden a horse before, she is experiencing a lot of new sensations today. Mostly the terrifying realization of how far the ground actually is. But having Noah pressed right up behind her makes it surprisingly comforting. She is just incredibly thankful he showed up to rescue her. His solid presence instantly melts away all her royal anxiety. She is especially relieved that he totally forgave her for the whole abandonment incident. She turns her head to properly thank her favorite employee. But the words completely die in her throat when she sees his expression. The sweet hero from 2 seconds ago has been replaced by a brooding thunderstorm. She swallows hard, realizing our boy is actually absolutely furious about something. Awkward. Behind her, Noah is having a complete internal meltdown over her dazzling smile. He frantically wonders why his heart is suddenly doing aggressive backflips. He has never seen her look that stunningly happy before. He desperately rationalizes that she was just thrilled to get rescued. Or maybe she was just terrified of missing this massive royal party. Or worse, maybe she was just desperate to see her supposed fiancé. He aggressively reminds himself that her love life is absolutely none of his business. He has absolutely zero reason to be this emotionally invested. He is literally just a hired bodyguard earning a paycheck. He chants this pathetic lie in his head, begging it to stick, but his aggressively sweating forehead and trembling hands totally betray him. He ruthlessly scolds himself for acting like a hormonal teenager. Having her sit this close while smelling completely intoxicating is actual torture. Suddenly, our girl peeks right over her shoulder at him. He violently flinches like he just got caught committing a crime. She flashes a gorgeous smile and softly thanks him for saving her. And with that one look, Noah's remaining brain cells completely evaporate. They both snap their heads forward, totally flustered by that sudden blast of romantic tension. He chokes out a gruff response as they ride in suffocatingly awkward silence. Finally, they roll right up to the massive royal estate. The towering palace gates are looking as obnoxiously majestic as ever. Inside, thirsty noble women are already drooling over how ridiculously hot the prince looks today. Oblivious politicians keep lining up to congratulate him on his upcoming royal wedding. They loudly gossip about how thrilled Lady Lucia must be for her big day. Practically nobody knows about the secret breakup, so everyone expects a massive celebration. The prince just stands there, letting the meaningless chatter wash right over him. His eyes are aggressively scanning the ballroom, desperate for any sign of his ex. A very annoying old man approaches to ruin his brooding session. Duke Charles orders him to slap on a fake smile and charm the foreign ambassadors. The grumpy politician lectures him about international alliances while the prince completely zones out. The duke keeps violently nagging him about royal politics and flawless public relations. But His Royal Highness only cares about figuring out why our girl is running late. Meanwhile, the real drama is brewing over at the fancy snack table. A very gossipy circle of noble ladies is whispering up a storm. They dramatically greet Lady Asteria, asking why she looks so obnoxiously smug today. The smug aunt brags that her beloved niece is finally back in town. She proudly waves the mystery girl over to show her off to the wolves. And stepping into the light is the disgustingly perfect, blonde female lead of the original novel. Lady Esther proudly parades her newly debuted niece in front of the local gossip circle. The blonde girl hits them with a perfectly practiced, disgustingly polite curtsy. The old bats immediately launch into that fake sweet noble banter about how much she has grown since Esther's wedding. But our perfect little heroine is completely ignoring them, secretly hoping to spot her future man. She politely begs her aunt to let her ditch the boring adults and go explore the party. She wanders through the insanely lavish garden, taking in the live music and dancing nobles. A couple of rich ladies are busy blowing smoke about how fabulous the event is. They whisper about how weird it is that the royal siblings are completely missing from the biggest party of the year, before instantly pivoting to the real gossip about the Marchioness's shiny new niece entering the market. The original female lead completely ignores the peasants, scanning the gorgeous scenery. She casually strolls through the crowd like she owns the place. Her eyes are darting everywhere, looking for a very specific, high-status target. Suddenly, she locks onto her prey. Her eyes literally sparkle with delusional romantic anticipation. Because her radar just successfully located the incredibly handsome crown prince. Her inner monologue immediately goes into overdrive, confirming he is the one. She gushes over how he looks exactly like her wildest, most romantic fantasies. Tall, brooding, and dripping with royal wealth. She mentally crowns him as her absolute, undisputed soulmate. She totally freaks out, realizing her destined lover is already walking straight toward her. The prince confidently strides right into her personal space. She bats her eyelashes, absolutely ready for their epic, slow-motion meet-cute. But His Royal Highness completely ignores her existence and walks right past her like she is a piece of furniture. Awkward. Her romantic fantasy shatters into a million tiny, embarrassing pieces. She is left standing there completely speechless, absolutely bodied by a guy who didn't even look at her. She sadly watches her supposed soulmate walk away to find someone way more important. Meanwhile, the real main event finally arrives, and the entire party stops to gawk at our girl's absolute perfection. Thirsty nobles immediately swarm her, desperate for a crumb of her attention. They try to make awkward small talk about her missing father. Another lady aggressively kisses up to her about her flawless beauty. Then the dreaded question hits, asking how the royal wedding preparations are going. They beg to hang out with her one last time before she supposedly moves into the palace. She plasters on a fake customer service smile, internally screaming because she desperately needs to find her ex. She furiously scans the crowd, completely panicked about keeping up this fake villainous act. She frantically tries to remember how the original Lucia would treat these annoying socialites, and immediately kicks herself for skipping chapters in that stupid novel. Two nosy ladies corner her, assuming she is just incredibly hyped for her new married life. A grumpy old council member jumps in to remind her about the extravagant wedding gifts. Our girl just stares at them with a totally blank, buffering poker face. Then someone brings up her recent near-death experience, checking if she is finally off bed rest. She rigidly nods, assuring the annoying old man that she is perfectly fine now. The guy bluntly demands she stay healthy so she can serve the royal court immediately after the wedding. Hearing this absolute audacity, our girl's brain completely short-circuits. She goes pale white, horrified to realize that absolutely nobody here knows about the secret breakup. She decides to just nuke the entire party and loudly announce the annulment herself. But before she can drop the bomb, the prince suddenly snatches her wrist. He dramatically kisses her hand right in front of the gossiping politicians. He smoothly tells the council to back off and give his precious fiancée some breathing room. The clueless council eats up the performance of a deeply in love couple, while our girl is utterly paralyzed by his audacity. She is completely stunned at what is happening right now. She firmly says his title, heavily implying she is about to commit treason. She glares at him with eyes that could melt steel, leaving him sweating absolute bullets. Terrified, her ex-fiancé desperately begs to speak to her in private before she murders him in front of everyone. Let's rewind a few minutes to our girl's chaotic grand entrance. We get to witness this absolute spectacle through Noah's lovesick eyes. He stares at his boss, completely drowning in his own feelings. He internally compares her to the literal, shining sun. But he sadly realizes that the sun is light years out of his league. He aggressively tells himself she belongs up there in high society. And he belongs right back in the dirt, wallowing in peasant misery. He watches those dusty politicians demand royal heirs, and his fist practically vibrates with rage. Hearing them order her to stay healthy just for breeding purposes makes him physically sick. But before our girl can publicly dump her royal baggage, the prince swoops in. The royal headache himself dramatically kisses her hand in front of everyone. He smoothly tells the creepy old men that there is absolutely no rush. Then he pulls her into a highly territorial, deeply non-platonic back hug. Poor Noah is forced to watch this romantic horror movie from the sidelines. Our bodyguard is drowning in an ocean of pure, unadulterated jealousy. The prince loudly declares he is just thrilled his lovely bride is doing well. The clueless council eats up the fake romance, while our girl is utterly paralyzed. Before she can verbally decapitate him, he practically begs for a private chat. The toxic couple marches off to argue, with a very invested bodyguard trailing behind. The peanut gallery immediately starts whispering about that spicy public display. They gossip about how unexpectedly obsessed the prince suddenly seems, which totally contradicts the juicy rumor that he absolutely despised his fiancée. Then they completely pivot to drooling over the outrageously hot knight standing behind her. Eavesdropping nearby, the blonde original heroine is quietly absorbing all this gossip. She is having a total meltdown, absolutely furious that she didn't get the prince's attention. Worse than that, the prince's fiancée looked exactly like a girl she used to know. Meanwhile, our messy exes drag their drama to a painfully romantic Swan Lake. They stare out at the water, practically suffocating in the tension. The prince sneaks a pathetic glance at his incredibly angry companion. His Royal Highness brilliantly deduces that she might be slightly upset. "Sherlock, is that you?" She demands to know why they haven't publicly broken up yet. He physically flinches, starts stammering out a pathetic, fumbling excuse. She aggressively mocks his little performance from earlier, screaming right in his face that there is absolutely no need to rush. The crown prince is utterly frozen by her absolute ferocity. He avoids eye contact, weakly claiming he was totally going to tell her the plan. She practically spits the word back at him, demanding the rest of that sentence. He pitifully blames her for being late, claiming he simply couldn't find her. That pathetic excuse just throws gasoline on the fire, and she screams his title again. Right on cue, a massive crack of dramatic thunderstorm lightning splits the sky. She minces no words, reminding him they finalized this secret breakup weeks ago. The royal failure looks away, fully knowing he massively messed up. She screams that the annulment was supposed to be official today. Hiding in the bushes, Noah overhears this glorious, life-changing piece of information. She continues verbally destroying the prince. She furiously rants about how the council still thinks they are tying the knot. Before she can finish her rant, the prince snaps and interrupts her. He aggressively starts to say he doesn't want this either. But his angry outburst completely dies in his throat. He gets a good look at how absolutely devastating she looks in that dress. He awkwardly averts his eyes, weakly mumbling that he doesn't want to marry her either. He vaguely claims some mysterious royal business ruined the secret breakup schedule. Our girl demands to know what on earth is preventing their glorious breakup. Panic sets in as she realizes this exact scene went perfectly in Chapter 1. How did she manage to derail the timeline this badly? Instead of explaining himself, the royal headache takes a highly unnecessary step forward, reaching out like he is trying to tame a feral cat. Suddenly he snatches both her hands, invading her personal space to a criminal degree. Every alarm bell in her brain screams at this terrifying new level of intimacy. Stuttering like a broken record, the guy cannot finish a single thought. Adding to the weirdness, his hands are vibrating like a malfunctioning carriage wheel. Deciding this hand-holding is entirely cursed, she aggressively yanks her fingers away. Turning away, he awkwardly mutters about needing to leave before embarrassing himself further. He promises to explain this whole mess during a four-sibling sleepover at his villa. Making his dramatic escape, he marches right past our resident brooding knight. The proximity between these two guys practically radiates toxic masculine energy. Being a petty child, the crown prince deliberately shoulder-checks our boy. Pausing his exit just to deliver a painfully cliché villain line, he haughtily orders the lowly peasant to remember his place. Then he finally storms off into the gloomy palace gardens. Noah calmly brushes the royal audacity off his shoulder like a piece of lint. Safely out of sight, Mr. Arrogance instantly collapses against a stone wall. A highly concerning streak of crimson drips onto his expensive royal sleeve. Sighing at the sudden nosebleed, he seems way too used to his own failing health. Whipping out a heavily stained handkerchief proves this is a chronic issue. Cleaning up the mess, he admits the stress is draining the life out of him. But his fragile little heart immediately goes right back to obsessing over his ex-fiancée. Tragic violin music plays in his head as he wonders why his biggest fangirl hates him now. Replaying that interaction, it looked less like anger and more like pure disgust. His royal ego loops endlessly around her sudden personality transplant. The sheer horror on her face is going to haunt his nightmares. And worst of all, he hates how much her rejection is actually hurting his feelings. Meanwhile, back at the scenic Swan Lake, our handsome bodyguard is still hovering near the crime scene, clocking the total emotional devastation rolling off his boss. His first instinct is to swoop in and be the perfect comforting hero, but the harsh reality of their class divide glues his heavy boots to the ground. Left alone, our girl is having a quiet, heavily repressed mental breakdown. She followed the breakup script flawlessly, so this sudden clinginess is terrifying. Taking a deep, shaky breath to stop herself from screaming into the void, she tries to gaslight herself into believing this is just a minor setback, praying there is some logical reason for the massive delay. Because the alternative is that this cursed novel refuses to let them break up, letting out a painfully heavy sigh. She admits this entire picnic was a catastrophic dumpster fire from start to finish. Across the party, the neglected blonde heroine is having the exact same bitter realization. This was not how it was supposed to go. Back at the increasingly cursed garden party, the clueless nobles are busy complaining about the incoming thunderstorm. Meanwhile, the original blonde heroine is having a massive existential crisis into her teacup. Her brain is violently malfunctioning over a deeply unsettling realization. The supposed villainess looks chillingly identical to a girl she had long forgotten. The math just isn't matching for the plotline, and that hauntingly familiar face doesn't make it any better. She feels the precious plot armor violently ripping away from her. Getting brutally ghosted by her destined royal soulmate has sent her straight into a delusional panic spiral. Her annoying aunt rudely interrupts the pity party to search for a missing nephew named Henry. Apparently, this elusive cousin is supposed to be networking with the Dusty Council members right now. Claire hypes herself up, chanting that she is the undisputed main character of this universe. Well, unfortunately for high society, Cousin Henry is currently skipping his networking event to commit aggravated assault. We find this walking lawsuit cornering a very battered kid in the dirt like a deranged lunatic. Cracking his knuckles, the arrogant brat happily prepares to dish out a highly illegal beatdown. And the poor victim bleeding on the pavement is none other than our girl's emotionally constipated little brother. Henry taunts the grumpy teenager, demanding a polite greeting while looming menacingly over him, mocking Theodore for trying to mind his own business instead of bowing down to these trust fund babies. The insecure bully demands to know if the genius kid thinks he is somehow superior to them. Even from the dirt, Theodore looks this thug dead in the eye and hits him with a devastatingly smug yes. His fragile ego shatters instantly, earning Theodore a brutal punch straight to his disgustingly handsome face. Turns out this entire gang assault is literally just academic jealousy over some test scores. Spitting blood, the edgy teenager ruthlessly roasts their embarrassing lack of intelligence, calling them pathetic lowlifes. Before he can deliver another savage one-liner, Henry viciously kicks him in the ribs. The impact sends the poor kid sprawling right back into the unforgiving gravel, taking sadistic pleasure in violently kicking a kid while he is down. The normally arrogant little brother is left trembling on the ground like a helpless puppy. Even Henry's brainless lackeys suddenly realize this is escalating straight into attempted murder territory. But the unhinged rich kid just keeps relentlessly beating the living daylights out of him. Panic sets in as his friends desperately try to pry this feral psycho off his victim. They frantically drag their buddy away before someone actually calls the royal guards on them. The gravel is left painted with blood as Theodore coughs, physically wrecked by the attack. Tossing one last pathetic insult over his shoulder, the coward finally scampers off with his tail between his legs. Left alone in the dirt, the tough guy persona shatters into a million tiny, tragic pieces. He stubbornly tries to peel his broken body off the pavement. Mentally exhausted, he is officially sick and tired of playing the tragic punching bag. Blissfully unaware of the violence, our fake villainess is taking a scenic stroll with her personal bodyguard. Noah steals a sneaky, desperately lovesick glance at his gorgeous boss, getting wildly blindsided by how ridiculously radiant she looks in the gloomy weather. Our giant, lethal knight is officially blushing harder than a schoolboy with a crush. Trying to play it cool, he softly attempts to get her attention. He asks if she needs a jacket, but her eyes are already locked onto a highly concerning lump on the ground. Squinting through the gloom, they realize her snotty younger brother is currently eating dirt by the guardrail. She casually jogs over to scold him for taking a public nap before the horrifying reality sets in. Pure, unadulterated panic drops her jaw straight to the floor as she screams his name. Theodore's brain violently short-circuits at the sight of his notoriously evil sister actually looking terrified for him. She wildly orders her knight to go fetch a doctor before her brother literally bleeds out on the grass. Cradling his bruised face, she unleashes a frantic barrage of deeply concerned, sisterly questions. The edgy teenager aggressively recoils, violently annoyed that our girl is witnessing his lowest moment. Forcing himself upright, he hits her with a desperately grumpy wall of teenage angst. Refusing to let this injured idiot walk away, she demands he stop acting like a stubborn martyr. Throwing personal space out the window, she firmly offers her shoulder as a makeshift crutch. Instead of accepting the help, his bloody hand shoots out and violently snatches her wrist. His grip is terrifyingly tight as his eyes lock onto hers with chilling, predatory clarity. He ruthlessly drops a massive, plot-shattering bomb, asking if she forgot exactly who she is pretending to be. Our girl freezes, her brain short-circuiting as she stammers out a confused question. Theodore tightens his grip on her wrist, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Tears immediately prick her eyes as he coldly reminds her of reality. He arrogantly declares his status as the Duke's actual flesh and blood. He orders her to never carelessly touch him again, looking totally lethal. Before the moody teenager can escalate things, Noah swoops in and lifts the kid right off the ground by his collar. Our fiercely protective knight slams the battered noble firmly against the stone wall. He glares daggers at the brat, delivering a terrifyingly quiet warning to back off. Panicking, she orders her bodyguard to drop him since the boy is already bleeding. Noah reluctantly unhands the teenager, letting him hit the pavement with a painful gasp. Her immediate instinct is to reach out and comfort her supposed little brother. But her hand hovers in the air, violently shaking with fear and hesitation. She slowly pulls it back, painfully accepting that he truly hates her guts. Needing to handle this mess alone, she formally dismisses Noah for the rest of the day. He desperately tries to protest, but she flashes a strained, deeply fake smile to assure him she is fine. The knight just stares at her, fully aware that she is lying through her teeth. But he stubbornly respects her boundaries and quietly accepts the order. His protective instincts are screaming at him to turn right back around. Leaving her alone with that hostile kid is the last thing he wants to do. Back in the danger zone, our girl is officially stranded alone with her worst nightmare. Her entire body is trembling, the pure panic finally taking full control. She lets out a shaky breath, admitting she is utterly terrified of what comes next. Desperate to salvage the situation, she stammers out the beginning of an apology. Theodore brutally cuts her off, mocking her obvious desperation to know how he figured out her secret. She tries to say she is sorry, but he ruthlessly refuses to hear a single excuse. His eyes lock onto hers with zero mercy and deadly seriousness. He casually suggests she save her pathetic apologies for the royal executioner. That horrific threat makes her eyes snap wide open in terror. Her legs give out as Theodore demands to know how she ever thought this scam would work, reminding her she is actively impersonating the future queen of the empire, and blatantly insulting the highest-ranking noble family in the land. He darkly asks if she truly understands the bloody penalty for high treason. He doesn't care who hired her, he just vows that his family will not be made fools of. He mockingly tells her to enjoy playing dress-up in her stolen luxury items, emphasizing that her borrowed time is officially running out. He promises to keep her secret for now, leaving our fake villainess trapped and crying. His final demand is that she stays as far away from him as physically possible. He spits her fake name with enough venom to kill a snake. As the grumpy teenager limps away, she's left agonizing over her ruined survival plan. Her mind races, desperately trying to invent a believable excuse for this disaster. She wanders aimlessly away from the scene, entirely numb to her surroundings. She mentally curses, acknowledging that nothing went according to script today. The sheer anxiety is making her physically sick to her stomach. Collapsing against a tree, she spirals into paranoia about who else might have figured out her true identity. She dreads the prince discovering the truth, wondering if the real Villainess is ever actually coming back to fix this. She stares blankly at her glittering royal tiara. A deeply uncomfortable realization suddenly hits her. She wonders if she secretly started enjoying this glamorous, fake life. But the tears fall as she bitterly accepts she is nothing more than an imposter playing house. Above her, the dark thunderstorm finally begins to break apart into clear skies. But our girl is still miserably glued to that tree, drained of all hope. Suddenly, a playful voice interrupts her pity party, teasing her about a past tree climbing incident. The mischievous second prince steps into view, cheerfully asking for tips on how to comfort a crying girl. Startled by the sudden intrusion, our girl stammers out a confused greeting. She nervously addresses the royal by his formal title, but he casually insists on just Leo. Stepping closer, she desperately tries to figure out how much he actually knows. Her anxiety spikes all over again, terrified that this prince has also discovered her fake identity. The sheer stress of dodging treason charges is making her physically nauseous. Instead of accusing her, he gently places the fallen tiara right back onto her head. He asks if she is feeling unwell, using her official noble title with a soft tone. Frantically trying to hide her recent crying session, she awkwardly blames her shaky voice on nerves. Realizing that sounds incredibly suspicious, she immediately backtracks and insists she is perfectly fine. Catching the slip-up, Leo playfully leans in and asks if his presence makes her nervous. After regretting her every life decision, she masterfully questions why she would ever be intimidated by her royal bestie who she has definitely known for forever. The brain fart is real. Grabbing her hands, Leo cheerfully points out that this is in fact the longest conversation they've had. Strolling through the garden, he casually asks about today's cancelled royal breakup. He finds his older brother's sudden hesitation completely fascinating. He ruthlessly reminds her that the crown prince always hated the idea of this arranged marriage. Hearing that insult still stings her pride, even if it is technically directed at the original Villainess. Suddenly, a sharp wave of stomach cramps hits her, adding literal injury to a highly stressful day. Surviving a treason threat was bad enough without her digestive system actively turning against her. The playful prince suddenly steps directly into her personal space, leaving her bewildered. Without a single warning, he smoothly scoops her right up into his arms. She freezes like a deer in headlights, stunned by the impromptu bridal carry. He casually mentions her upcoming, highly awkward family vacation at the royal villa. Deciding to play the gentleman, he offers to personally deliver her straight to her guest room. Our stubborn girl immediately protests, insisting her legs work fine despite looking incredibly pale. But a brutal wave of cramps interrupts her brave speech, making her violently flinch in pain. Tightening his grip, he seriously asks if they need to summon the royal doctor for this. She declines the medical help, suddenly realizing how scandalous they must look together in the garden. The chilling echo of Theodore threatening her over her fake engagement rings in her ears. If her terrifying little brother caught her in another prince's arms, he would assume the worst. But the sheer exhaustion finally wins, and she weakly rests her heavy head against his shoulder. Snuggling into his jacket, she admits defeat to the overwhelming stomach pain. Trembling against him, she softly mutters a genuine word of gratitude for the rescue. The usually mischievous prince just gives her a surprisingly tender, quiet response. Fast forward to a gorgeous golden sunset washing over the royal palace grounds. The endless garden party is finally wrapping up, with exhausted nobles piling into their carriages. It has been hours since the dramatic confrontation, and the estate is almost entirely empty. Our fiercely loyal knight is actively pacing the grounds, terrified that his boss has collapsed in a ditch somewhere. He viciously curses himself for leaving her alone with that hostile brat of a younger brother. His murderous internal monologue is suddenly interrupted by a very demanding voice. Older brother Alexander stomps over, aggressively demanding to know where his sister wandered off to. The overbearing noble grills the poor bodyguard for failing to shadow his target every waking second. Before Noah can invent a believable excuse, his heart immediately drops to his stomach upon seeing a very familiar scarf in another man's arms. Flashing a highly suspicious smile, the second prince cheerfully announces that the lady has been with him the entire time. Alexander snaps to attention as Leo casually explains he carried our sick girl to the villa. The word ill instantly sets off massive alarm bells in Noah's head. Without asking for permission, the panicked knight spins on his heel and bolts. The two nobles are left staring at the bodyguard's wildly unprofessional exit. Alexander scoffs, deeply offended by the lack of a proper goodbye. He aggressively demands to know where his sister dug up such a disrespectful employee. Leo curiously asks for a name, learning the knight was hired right after the recent accident. Despite passing a background check, Alexander admits the rookie guard is painfully strange. Leo flashes a knowing smile, clearly finding this entire situation incredibly fascinating. He specifically asks if his older brother has met this handsome new bodyguard yet. Alexander confirms the crown prince was actually there the very day Noah was hired. Glancing over at his miserable brother, Leo realizes the messy romantic drama is already brewing. Meanwhile, Arthur is currently trapped in the most painfully boring political small talk imaginable. The foreign ambassadors are aggressively kissing up to the exhausted crown prince, but his eyes are drawn elsewhere. But then his eyes drift downward, spotting the first scarf resting on Leo's shoulder. How did it end up there? A clueless politician interrupts his Sherlock moment, bringing up a royal union in the West. They drone on about political leverage and how this marriage secures the empire's future. Arthur awkwardly tries to pivot the conversation toward his own agenda, but another stuffy official interrupts, bragging about a generous gift from the emperor. Apparently, an entire fleet arrived this morning to honor the upcoming royal wedding. The ambassador smoothly thanks them for the lavish gifts Arthur supposedly sent in return. Arthur stands there with a frozen smile, internally panicking, because he definitely never authorized any diplomatic gifts. He realizes someone on the council is making massive political moves entirely behind his back. To make matters worse, the ambassador cheerfully pivots back to Arthur's upcoming marriage. The crown prince violently flinches, reminded of his own disastrous love life. He stares at the ground, crushed by the weight of these impossible political expectations. Forced into a corner, he nervously chokes out an agreement, cowardly confirming the wedding is still happening, betraying his promise to our girl. Back at the villa, a maid kindly announces that a hot bath is finally ready. The heavy silence of the empty room feels incredibly suffocating. She sinks into the warm water, hoping it will wash away the sheer panic. Scrubbing her shoulders, her mind aggressively loops back to Theodore's terrifying threat. But as the water hits her bare skin, a horrific realization finally clicks. She remembers the massive, miraculously missing scar on her back. She slumps deeper into the tub, utterly defeated by her own stupidity. That rare sibling hug wasn't affection. Theodore was physically checking for her injury. She mentally kicks herself, realizing that edgy teenager was plotting against her from day one. Her delusional hope of peacefully surviving this novel has officially shattered. She frantically wonders if she should just sprint into the woods and live off berries. But the bigger, much more terrifying question looms over her head. Will she ever actually find a way back to her original reality? She doesn't even have a clue how her soul got violently shoved into this villainous body. Suddenly, a very strange sensation washes over her mind. A vivid flash of drowning fills her head, followed by a mysterious hand grabbing hers. In the vision, an unknown man desperately pulls her out of the suffocating depths. She feels the sheer panic of nearly dying, combined with the relief of being rescued. A blurry voice urgently screams for her to wake up. Our girl violently gasps for air, snapping her eyes wide open. She bolts upright in the shallow tub, realizing she wasn't actually drowning at all. Her heart is hammering in her chest as she clutches the edges of the porcelain. She stares blankly at the rippling water, deeply disturbed by the sudden flashback, leaving her to wonder if she just unlocked a genuine memory from her past life. Later that evening, our exhausted girl is finally alone in her bedroom. She stares at the ceiling, desperately trying to untangle her messy memories. The earliest thing she can recall is sprinting through a forest before blacking out. But she is totally convinced that weird drowning flash was a genuine piece of her past. She remembers being pulled from the water, which makes zero sense if Alexander supposedly found her. Her mind is a foggy mess, but she clings to one desperate hope. Figuring out how she arrived in this cursed novel is the only way to escape it. Laying in bed, she rubs her wrist, staring at the ugly bruises Theodore left behind. She wonders if she will ever actually belong anywhere in this twisted universe. The heavy silence of the room just makes her feel even more isolated. A bitter voice in her head reminds her she is just a total imposter here. She sadly wonders if anyone in her original reality is even looking for her right now. Suddenly, a sharp clack against the glass instantly ruins her depressing pity party. She snaps her head toward the window, wildly confused by the sudden noise. Another sharp crack echoes through the room, officially confirming she is being pelted with rocks. Peeking outside, she spots a very handsome, very suspicious figure lurking in the courtyard. Noah whispers up to her, attempting the most cliché romantic gesture in history. Her depressive spiral vanishes instantly, replaced by a massive, giddy smile. Hopping out of bed, she practically squeals over her hunky bodyguard throwing pebbles at her window. She throws the glass open, bathing in the moonlight like a literal Disney princess. She is thrilled to finally be living out this iconic swoon. And just like that, the magical fairy tale vibe crashes straight into a brick wall. Down in the courtyard, Noah freezes, watching his own soul leave his body in real time. His brain just flatlines as he realizes he just assaulted his own boss. Pure panic officially sets in as he screams her name into the night. Our girl clutches her throbbing forehead, bitterly accepting that today is just cursed. Suddenly, her panicked knight is somehow scaling the castle wall like a professional ninja. He pops into the window frame, looking genuinely horrified that he just gave her a concussion. She just stares at him, deeply confused by this sudden display of superhuman parkour. Seriously, how on earth did a normal knight scale a 2-story building in 3 seconds? Ignoring gravity, he boldly invades her personal space to urgently inspect the damage. He pulls her incredibly close, frantically begging for forgiveness for his terrible aim. He babbles about not seeing the window open, desperately checking if she is okay. But as he leans in to check the bruise, a dangerous realization hits him. They are currently millimeters apart, locked in an intensely heavy staring contest. Oblivious to the tension, she flashes a sweet, goofy smile and casually says hello. If Noah's soul had returned to his body, it instantly ejects itself right back out. But instead of screaming, a highly unexpected sound breaks the awkward silence. She absolutely loses it, laughing hysterically at her traumatized bodyguard. She playfully teases him, wishing she had a mirror to show him his own horrified expression. He desperately tries to apologize, but she keeps cutting him off with her giggling fit. The panicked knight slowly stops talking, quietly observing the girl in front of him. Seeing her cheerfully laughing off a bloody nose and fresh bruises is seriously messing with his head. He realizes this level of upbeat resilience is highly abnormal for a spoiled noble. Finally catching her breath, she wipes her nose and redirects the conversation. Stepping closer, she playfully demands to know why her knight is sneaking into her room at midnight. Instead of answering, his fingers gently brush against the dark marks on her wrist. He quietly mutters that he knew that violent brat was going to leave a mark. The goofy romantic is instantly gone, replaced by a knight radiating pure, protective fury. She glances down at the ugly purple bruises, almost forgetting Theodore had grabbed her that hard. The silence stretches out, filled only by the crackle of the fireplace behind them. Noah is just holding her injured hand, treating it like it is made of fragile glass. She is mesmerized by how incredibly gentle this massive, lethal guy can be. His touch is so incredibly light, like he is terrified of making the pain worse. The intense, hyper-focused look on his face is giving her major butterflies. Finding a scary knight acting this nervous over a bruise is undeniably adorable. But then he breaks the silence, asking a question that totally throws her off guard. He softly demands to know if she is going to keep forgetting he exists. Guilt washes over her as she awkwardly looks away from his intense gaze. She had ditched him at the picnic with Leo because she panicked and wanted to spare him the drama. And then she actively fired him for the day to deal with her aggressive brother alone. Kneeling down to meet her eyes, he stubbornly points out that she ordered him to leave. He claims he only went easy on Theodore because the kid was already injured. She mentally questions his definition of easy, considering he practically threw the brat through a stone wall. His voice drops, delivering a chilling promise that he absolutely will not hold back next time. Seeing this sweet guy look so fiercely deadly genuinely surprises her. The magnetic pull between them flares up again as they drift dangerously close. His hand reaches out, looking like he is desperately fighting the urge to pull her in. But the professional boundaries snap back into place, and he forces himself to pull away. Looking down, he clears his throat and politely suggests it is time for her to sleep. The brooding knight stands back up to his full, intimidating height. He takes a step back toward the window, ending their midnight rendezvous. Before he can disappear into the night, she calls out and stops him in his tracks. She genuinely thanks him for saving her today, but begs him to ignore Theodore's bratty behavior. She lies through her teeth, claiming it is just normal sibling rivalry and deep down they love each other. In reality, she just refuses to let Noah ruin his life by assaulting a high-ranking noble on her behalf. She is already doomed to the executioner. She doesn't need to drag her bodyguard down with her. Noah listens to her clumsy excuse, immediately clocking that it is a blatant lie. He firmly reminds her that protecting her from threats is literally his entire job description. He practically begs her to actually use his sword the next time someone tries to hurt her. And with that dramatic exit line, he casually hurls himself backward out of the second-story window. Her brain short-circuits, screaming that her bodyguard just willingly plummeted to his death. Sprinting to the ledge, she expects to see a broken knight, but he is just casually walking away. She stares into the darkness, utterly baffled by how unbothered he is by gravity. The sheer stress of the moment finally catches up, and her nose starts dripping blood all over again. Wiping her face, she sarcastically applauds his incredible aim for causing this whole mess. Our fake Villainess is currently snoring loud enough to wake the dead. Standing over the bed, Mary glares at her with pure, unfiltered disgust, silently judges her for being aggressively undignified. Our girl finally blinks awake, thoroughly bewildered by her sudden audience. Mary aggressively spits out a cold, highly sarcastic good morning. Her panicked screaming startles the poor staff, prompting a highly judgmental wellness check. She desperately tries to play it cool, nodding vigorously to calm the room down. Finding out she has a mandatory breakfast with the royal family instantly ruins her morning. Shoved into a fitting room, she mentally prepares for a painfully awkward family reunion. How anyone expects her to digest food inside this medieval torture device is beyond her. The staff kindly reminds her that the original Lucia actually loved these suffocating corsets. She politely begs for something looser, while Mary silently labels her a dramatic spoiled brat. The grumpy tutor is dangerously close to actually slapping her high-maintenance guest. Apparently, the concept of casual wear simply does not exist in a villainous wardrobe. Seizing a golden opportunity for sabotage, Mary steps in with a sinister smile. She cheerfully tells our girl to hold on while she grabs something special. Returning to the room, she dramatically presents a beautifully wrapped mystery box. Inside sits a gorgeous, surprisingly simple gown that looks like pure heaven. Mary claims it is the finest silk, while the maids whisper in sheer horror behind her back. The terrified servants clearly know this specific outfit is basically a death sentence. Oblivious to the trap, our girl happily praises Mary for being a true lifesaver. But behind that polite smile, the wicked tutor is mentally preparing for a bloodbath. Because this incredibly comfy dress actually belonged to the tragically deceased queen, the original Lucia begged to wear it, creepily hoping to manipulate the prince's mommy issues. Mary knows full well that seeing his ex in this gown will send Arthur into a murderous rage. It is the perfect petty revenge against the girl trying to steal her beloved queen's throne. Having set the bomb, the tutor smoothly excuses herself and the terrified staff. She casually mentions breakfast is in the second dining room without leaving a map. Panic immediately sets in as our girl realizes she has zero sense of direction. The heavy wooden door slams shut, officially trapping her in this massive royal maze. Left entirely alone, she accepts that she is about to be humiliatingly late for breakfast. Stepping out of her suite, she tries to mentally channel her inner royal GPS. She bravely tries to convince herself that navigating a castle cannot be that hard, assuming it is just a few hallways and a couple of fancy staircases. Sometime later, our fake villainess is physically exhausted from wandering the endless labyrinth. Her feet are screaming in agony, desperately begging for a 5-minute sitting break. And she is still tragically nowhere near the elusive second dining room. Ducking into a random office, she instantly spots a pile of highly concerning bloody tissues. Staring at the mess, she realizes she just stumbled into a potential crime scene. Suddenly, heavy footsteps and aggressive shouting echo from the hallway outside. The crown prince violently kicks the door open, barking orders at a panicking older politician. Trapped behind a bookshelf, our girl eavesdrops on an intense argument about a royal wedding. Arthur fiercely bites back, demanding that his sister actually gets to be happy. Hiding in the shadows, our girl is genuinely shocked to discover Arthur even has a sister. The protective brother refuses to marry his sibling off to a notoriously corrupt Western prince. Count Charles firmly reminds him that political leverage is way more important than human emotions. Securing a tie with the emperor's only successor is the ultimate jackpot of diplomatic networking. But Arthur stubbornly refuses to gamble his family on such a shady political alliance. The desperate politician points out the massive fleet of ships they just received as a bribe, claiming that rejecting such a lavish diplomatic gift would practically start a war. The prince glares daggers at the old man, furious that these bribes were hidden from him. The sweaty council members exchange panicked looks, terrified by Arthur's sudden spine of steel. Taking his seat, the prince drops a massive bombshell. He already shipped the entire bribe back. The collective gasp in the room proves he just committed a massive diplomatic faux pas. They frantically accuse him of being dangerously irrational, while our girl watches the royal chaos unfold. Arthur just hits them with a terrifyingly cold, unbothered stare. He ruthlessly dismisses the entire whining council from his private office. The grumpy old men shuffle out, aggressively whispering about his terrible leadership skills. Glued to the wall, our girl holds her breath, praying she remains invisible. Once the door clicks shut, the stressed prince violently slams his fists against the mahogany desk. Slumping into his leather chair, he bitterly mutters about how he isn't even the king yet. He stares blankly at the ceiling, drowning in the miserable reality of royal politics. Meanwhile, our trapped eavesdropper is having a massive internal panic attack about getting caught. Desperate for an exit, she spots a beautifully open window just begging to be used. Sacrificing every ounce of her dignity, she starts army crawling across the rug toward freedom. Our girl successfully sneaks onto the balcony, seriously debating if jumping is a viable exit strategy, wondering how her bodyguard casually defies gravity on a daily basis. Unbeknownst to her, a very stressed royal is creeping up from behind. The crown prince stops dead in his tracks upon spotting her. Seeing that specific silk dress completely breaks his exhausted brain, replacing her with his late mother. Tears instantly stream down his face as the sheer grief takes over. He blindly stumbles toward the balcony like a man in a trance. Hearing a shaky voice whisper behind her nearly gives our girl a heart attack. She whips around, awkwardly greeting the man she was literally just hiding from. Instead of snapping at her, he weakly reaches out a trembling hand. He violently pulls her into a desperate hug while she frantically tries to excuse her trespassing. But her panicked excuses die in her throat when she realizes he is completely sobbing. The crown prince tightly clings to his ex-fiancée, absolutely bawling for his mom. Our girl is deeply confused, realizing Mary's vintage dress trap worked entirely too well. The heavy emotional weight drags them both down to the cold floor. He practically chokes on his own tears, confessing that the royal pressure is finally breaking him. Dropping the villainous act, she gently returns the hug to comfort the shattered guy. The sheer exhaustion finally wins, and His Royal Highness completely blacks out in her arms. A panicked royal advisor spots the collapsed prince and comes sprinting toward the balcony. Tucked safely into bed, a grumpy physician scolds the staff for letting the prince starve himself for 4 days. His terrified secretary admits this specific mental breakdown is way worse than usual. The doctor bluntly warns them that this level of chronic stress is going to kill the future king. Prescribing some heavy medication, he stresses that Arthur desperately needs to be kept away from politics. Listening to the grim diagnosis, our girl realizes how horrifyingly close her ex is to the edge. A surprising wave of guilt washes over her, convincing her to stay by his bedside. Before leaving, the royal doctor shoots her an incredibly serious look. He demands absolute secrecy, knowing a weak crown prince would cause a massive political scandal. She solemnly promises to take this embarrassing royal meltdown to her grave. The medical staff quickly shuffles the noisy politicians right out of the bedroom. She politely requests to stay behind and play nurse until his dangerous fever breaks. Gently pressing a damp towel to his forehead, she faces a harsh reality check about her own empathy. She always considered herself a perfectly reasonable, non-judgmental person. Yet she treated this poor guy like a toxic villain based entirely on a book she barely read. She wonders if this crushing political nightmare is exactly why he stalled their secret annulment. Her brain keeps buffering, trying to figure out why the original plot completely skipped this depression arc. She mentally spirals, terrified that her fake identity actively ruined the timeline and caused this butterfly effect. The sheer guilt of accidentally rewriting everyone's personality is eating her alive. Looking down at his miserable, sweaty face, a much deeper realization hits her. This isn't just words on a page anymore. These are actual people with deeply traumatized lives. And the crown prince of this supposedly fictional empire is very clearly suffering. Tossing the novel's script out the window, she quietly commits to watching over him. Deep in his fever dream, we are transported straight into a tragic royal flashback. A tiny, ridiculously adorable version of Arthur is hanging out in a sunlit garden. A gentle, hauntingly familiar voice calls out to the little prince. The late queen looks absolutely stunning, wearing the exact same silk dress Mary weaponized earlier. The tiny prince happily sprints through the flowers toward his favorite person. He crashes into her skirt, absolutely thrilled to be getting some rare maternal affection. She warmly wraps him up, while he adorably confesses how much he missed her. Noticing his tiny tears, the queen gently asks what broke his little heart. Scrubbing his face, he delivers a painfully heavy confession for a literal child. He completely spirals, sobbing that he is a massive disappointment who will never be good enough to rule. The queen immediately stops that toxic self-doubt, gently cupping his chubby cheeks. Calling it absolute nonsense, she softly asks why her brave boy is so terrified of the future. Pressing a sweet kiss to his forehead, she promises that he is destined for absolute greatness. The feverish adult Arthur mumbles into his pillow, desperately begging the hallucination to stay. But the fever finally breaks, forcing his heavy eyelids to snap wide open. Instead of his tragic mother, he finds his supposed worst enemy casually staring down at him. He croaks out a confused question, completely blanking on his embarrassing balcony meltdown. She hits him with a sassy reality check, admitting she actually stayed to play nurse. His royal brain completely short-circuits at the concept of his ex genuinely caring about his health. Taking pity on the exhausted guy, she offers some surprisingly soft, friendly reassurance. Recreating his dream without even knowing it, she presses a gentle, comforting kiss to his burning forehead. The sheer shock of that maternal gesture instantly shuts his brain down. Sometime later, His Royal Highness jolts awake from his medically induced nap. Staring at the ceiling, he actively gaslights himself into believing that incredibly sweet moment was just a hallucination. Pressing a hand to his racing heart, he wonders why his brain would torture him with a nice Lucia. Sitting up, the universe instantly proves him wrong when he spots our girl slumped over in a chair. He softly breathes her name, totally bewildered that she actually stayed by his side the entire time. Staring down at his supposed worst enemy, the exhausted prince genuinely cannot figure her out. That quiet moment of reflection shatters the second he recognizes her vintage silk gown. Dumping her unceremoniously onto the mattress, he demands to know why she is parading around in his dead mother's clothes. The sheer audacity of casually raiding the late queen's wardrobe makes his blood boil. Squirming in her sleep, our fake villainess whimpers out a desperate, subconscious apology. Realizing she is trapped in a nightmare, his fiery royal temper instantly fizzles out. Reaching out to steady her, his fingers brush against a set of ugly purple bruises wrapped in bandages. Dropping her wrist like a hot potato, he realizes poking the injured girl won't solve anything. With the drama paused, she continues tossing and turning through her traumatic dreams. Letting out a long, heavy sigh, the future king of the empire runs a stressed hand through his hair. Turning his back, the emotional whiplash of this fake engagement is officially giving him a migraine. For a guy who supposedly hates his ex, she is definitely taking up way too much space in his head. Glancing back at the fragile girl on his bed, the royal math simply isn't matting. Why is the most notoriously toxic noblewoman in high society suddenly acting like a wounded bird? Marrying her was supposed to be a simple, cold-blooded political transaction without all this messy emotion. Hand hovering near her cheek, he reminds himself this entire charade is just to protect his younger sister. Yet staying away from her is getting ridiculously difficult. Meanwhile, a painfully awkward family breakfast is currently underway in the main dining hall. Sweating under the pressure, Alexander nervously insists his sister's extreme tardiness is a rare glitch in her programming. Swirling his drink, Leo playfully points out that the infamous Lady Lucia has been full of surprising glitches lately. Choking on his excuse, the older brother fumbles to explain away her massive personality overhaul. Taking a wild swing, he blames the entire behavioral shift on her recent brush with death. Hiding just out of sight, Noah quietly eavesdrops on the juicy noble gossip. The mischievous second prince arches an eyebrow, bringing up the scandalous kidnapping rumors. Alexander solemnly confirms that the ambush was horrifyingly real, detailing how a lavish royal carriage was reduced to splinters while her guards were slaughtered in the dirt. With the sole surviving maid quitting out of sheer trauma, he paints a grim picture of his sister's mental state. Sipping his tea, Leo smoothly agrees that surviving a bloodbath is a valid excuse for acting weird. Recalling the rescue mission, Alexander describes finding his elegant sibling wearing literal peasant rags. The most chilling part was staring into her eyes and realizing she had zero clue who he was. We flash back to our disoriented girl, actively fighting off the terrified mansion staff. Trapped in a delirious panic, she begged them to understand she was from an entirely different reality. Hysterically claiming her name was Lucy, she demanded to be sent back to her own universe. Assuming his sister had lost her mind, Alexander summoned a doctor who diagnosed her with severe, trauma-induced psychosis. The royal physician coldly suggested putting an immediate end to her hysterical delusions. Presenting a massive, highly suspicious syringe filled with some neon green, Victorian-era nightmare juice. Shuddering at the dark memory, the older brother looks visibly haunted by the ordeal. He admits the terrifying breakdown almost convinced him she was gone forever. Flashing a relieved smile, he misses Theodore's eyes going wide as the horrifying truth about the imposter finally clicks. Alexander vows to launch a ruthless investigation the moment their father returns from his business trip. Lurking in the hallway, Noah's heart aches for the girl he previously thought was just another spoiled aristocrat. The overprotective brother promises to drag those bandits to the executioner's block himself. Stirring the pot, Leo casually wonders why the crown prince has been so oblivious to his fiancée's tragic suffering. Defending his honor, Alexander insists he send an urgent letter to Arthur the minute she was found. Bitterly sipping his morning tea, he admits her royal fiancé couldn't be bothered to actually visit her. Before the slander can continue, a very stressed counselor interrupts the morning meal, delivering the shocking news that Lady Lucia is currently enjoying a private breakfast in Arthur's study. Hearing those two toxic exes are hanging out willingly leaves Alexander and Theodore completely speechless. Enjoying the chaos, Leo flashes a knowing smile, teasing that his brother is suddenly very occupied. The royal troublemaker playfully wonders if the stubbornly single crown prince is catching feelings. Slipping away from the dining room, Noah's mind reels from the tragic backstory he just absorbed. A wave of relief washes over him, thankful her family rescued her from those woods, though guilt gnaws at him for avoiding her all morning when she needed a friend. Then Leo's teasing words about the cancelled breakup echo uncomfortably in his skull. Shaking his head, he firmly reminds himself how much she despises that arrogant royal jerk. But his traitorous imagination immediately conjures up a horrifyingly romantic royal proposal. And in this waking nightmare, our girl actually blushes and happily accepts the ring, violently snapping out of the delusion. The stressed bodyguard physically shakes his head to clear the thoughts, desperately gaslighting himself into believing she would never take that loser back. Though the tiny pathetic seed of jealousy written across his face tells a completely different story. Trying to play it cool, he loudly reminds his empty brain that he is just a hired sword, chanting his daily mantra that romantic feelings for a wealthy noble are strictly forbidden. He practically begs his own heart to remember his professional nightly boundaries. Okay, yeah, she is gorgeous and kind. But that doesn't mean he has the right to care about her breakfast dates. A dedicated bodyguard only cares about physical threats, not emotional attachments to high society drama. Furious at his own pathetic love-struck brain, he lets out a miserable groan. Glancing down the corridor, a familiar flash of silk suddenly catches his eye. Squinting through the gloom, he instantly recognizes his missing boss. Sprinting toward her, he drops the brooding loner act entirely. Sliding up to her side, he starts to casually ask what she is doing out here alone. The casual greeting dies in his throat, because he suddenly realizes she is silently sobbing her eyes out. Drifting back into her subconscious, our fake villainess finds herself trapped in a deeply unsettling dream. She slowly blinks her eyes open, completely disoriented by her surroundings. Glancing around the opulent room, she instantly recognizes her estranged grandmother's lavish estate, wondering if it had all been a dream. Her confusion shatters when a chillingly familiar voice demands to know why she is trespassing. Looking up, she locks eyes with the terrifying matriarch of her family. She attempts a polite greeting, but her grandmother completely ignores the pleasantries. The older woman just repeats her cold, hostile question. She demands to know why this girl dared to show her face in this house, before delivering the ultimate, soul-crushing label, murderer. Her eyes snap open in the real world, violently jolted awake by the nightmare. Panicking, she desperately wonders why her brain is torturing her with these suppressed memories. A warm blanket draped over her shoulders suddenly catches her attention. She looks around the dim room, wondering if the unconscious prince somehow put it there. She instantly dismisses the idea, assuming the heavily sedated royal hasn't moved an inch. Figuring a passing maid took pity on her, she leans back over the bed. She gently presses a hand to Arthur's forehead to check on his dangerous fever. As she leans in to gauge his temperature, a stray lock of her hair brushes against his cheek, while she sighs in relief that the heat has finally broken. The prince is actually wide awake, silently gripping the edges of his blanket. Completely oblivious to his consciousness, she just smiles, thankful he survived the breakdown. Satisfied with her nursing duties, our girl quietly slips out of the royal bedroom. The moment the door clicks shut, Arthur slowly sits up in the dark. He touches the spot she just grazed, realizing his supposed enemy has been crying this entire time. Out in the massive corridor, she begins the long, lonely walk back to her own quarters. The heavy silence of the palace only makes her lingering anxiety worse. She aggressively scrubs the leftover nightmare tears from her exhausted face. Desperately needing a distraction, she searches for a quiet place to hide, but a vibrant vase of sunflowers in the hallway instantly drags her right back into the past. She wanders out into the courtyard, completely lost in a deeply repressed childhood memory. She begs her own mind to stop the flashback, but the mental dam has already broken. We see a tiny, innocent version of our girl proudly presenting a bouquet to her mother. Her mom beamed like the sun, touched that her husband remembered these were her absolute favorite flowers. The heavily pregnant woman sweetly assured her daughter that the new baby brother would love them too. Back in the present, she practically begs her brain to shut these painful memories off. She frantically tries to push away the horrific tragedy that followed that perfect afternoon, because remembering her parents' warmth won't ever bring them back from the dead. Her entire body begins to tremble as the panic attack fully takes hold. She repeats that it was a freak accident, desperately trying to absolve herself of the blame, but the horrific sounds of crunching metal and shattered glass echo in her mind. Blinded by her own tears, she missteps and violently trips on the stone stairs. The cruelest detail of all is knowing her mother threw herself in harm's way just to shield her. Crumpled on the ground, she openly sobs for the parents she lost. The tragic irony is that they only got in that car because she suffered a sudden, life-threatening medical emergency. Her father had begged his pregnant wife to stay safely at home while he rushed to the hospital. But a mother's love refused to let her terrified daughter face surgery alone. Speeding down a treacherous mountain road in a torrential downpour, their desperate race against time ended in a catastrophic, fatal crash. Meanwhile, miles away in a pristine office, her grandmother received the worst phone call imaginable. The authorities grimly informed the wealthy matriarch that they finally located her missing daughter. The sheer shock caused her crystal wine glass to slip right through her fingers, shattering against the floor, perfectly mirroring her destroyed family. The police explained that a sudden rockfall crushed the vehicle, instantly killing the driver and the pregnant mother. In absolute denial, the grandmother screamed that it was impossible, having searched for her estranged child for 6 agonizing years. The officer gently added that a little girl survived the wreck but was currently fighting for her life in the ICU. He warns the devastated woman that her newfound granddaughter has a very slim chance of making it through the night. Fast forward where a freshly discharged orphan was handed over to her only living relative. The social worker awkwardly introduced the fragile kid to the terrifying woman who would now control her life. Instead of a loving embrace, the matriarch just stared down at her with absolute disgust. Dropping to her knees, she venomously blamed this terrified child for slaughtering her own mother. 2 hours later, she told the weeping orphan that she should have been the one to die in that crash. The vicious gossip spread like wildfire, with relatives whispering that her childish illness murdered an entire family. Snobby socialites cruelly agreed that it would have been better if the sick little girl had just perished. Snapping back to the present, this unbearable guilt is exactly why our girl is currently having a breakdown on the palace steps. Noah casually strolls up, a warm smile on his face as he asks what she is doing out here. But his cheerful greeting dies instantly when he registers her devastated, tear-stained face. Pure panic floods the knight's system as he frantically asks who dared to hurt his lady. She violently scrubs her eyes, pathetically trying to blame her breakdown on seasonal allergies. Babbling about the wind, she doesn't even notice Noah slowly peeling off his leather glove. She keeps forcing a fake, agonizingly cheerful smile while blaming the crazy weather for her tears. Reaching out, his warm, bare hand gently cups her trembling fingers. He softly tells her she never has to put on a brave face when he is around. Wiping a stray tear from her cheek, he promises never to push for answers she isn't ready to give. She just stares up at this incredibly gentle giant, totally overwhelmed by his unconditional support. Abandoning all noble etiquette, she throws herself forward and buries her face in his chest. The fiercely protective knight physically freezes, completely blindsided by the sudden embrace. For a brief second, he just stands there, processing the fact that the girl of his dreams is clinging to him. A light drizzle begins to fall, perfectly matching the gloomy, emotional atmosphere. Slowly recovering from the shock, his massive arms finally wrap around her fragile frame. And just like that, the two of them are locked in a deeply comforting, rain-soaked hug. As the rain falls, he softly asks what kind of unbearable sorrow is causing her this much pain. His heart aches for her, silently vowing to destroy whatever trauma is haunting her. He practically swears an oath to make her suffering stop. Feeling his absolute devotion, she wraps her arms tighter around his broad shoulders, while our hopelessly love-struck bodyguard decides he will literally do anything to protect her. Let's hop over to an unknown location, where a sweet girl is penning a letter to her Aunt Beatrice. She paints a cozy picture of her aunt relaxing with her favorite tea and fancy biscotti. The poor thing longs for warmer weather since the harsh cold is ruining her mother's health. Mentioning how much she misses everyone, she playfully scolds her aunt for being terrible at writing back. The letter cheekily asks if Beatrice is pregnant again, hoping she finally gets a girl after popping out 10 boys. Trapped in the boring countryside, she begs to hear about any exciting high society gossip. Her lonely heart is desperately yearning for some kind of grand destiny, an elusive, magical feeling she can barely even comprehend. Words totally fail to capture this massive romantic longing. Deep down, she just knows she was meant to live an extraordinary life, which naturally leads to her favorite daily distraction. She spends her endless days getting lost in mushy romance novels. Her mind is constantly occupied by glamorous royal balls, handsome princes, and epic adventures. Maybe all these vivid daydreams are actually a sign of her true calling. The incredibly sweet letter concludes with a signature from the real Claire, right before being tossed into a roaring fire. As the parchment turns to ash, the imposter heroine revels in her destructive sabotage. The devious blonde happily declares that her highly anticipated romantic timeline is finally starting. Intercepting this mail guarantees the actual protagonist remains trapped in the miserable countryside forever. This fake protagonist gloats about effortlessly hiding the truth from high society. So far, her sinister little master plan is working flawlessly. But the smug victory lap comes to a screeching halt. Her brain short-circuits trying to figure out the garden party disaster. Why on earth did her destined royal soulmate completely ignore her existence? According to the novel's script, it was supposed to be magical love at first sight. Panic sets in as she wonders if jumping the gun ruined the romance. That epic meet-cute wasn't officially scheduled until the royal engagement party. A much darker, infinitely more annoying theory crosses her mind. The mere thought of our fake villainess makes her blood boil. Slumping into a chair, the imposter spirals over a truly terrifying coincidence. This supposed Lucia looks chillingly identical to a very specific rival from her past reality. For a horrifying second, she suspects that girl somehow crossed over into this universe too. She quickly bats the thought away, refusing to believe anyone else hijacked her fantasy. Having another reincarnated soul wandering around would completely destroy her plot armor. It would rewrite the entire fabric of this carefully manipulated story. Every single guaranteed happy ending would be violently ripped away. Her eyes darken with sheer entitlement, fiercely declaring herself the undisputed master of this universe. The sinister monologue is interrupted by a disgustingly cheerful morning greeting. Cousin Henry, the exact same unhinged bully who assaulted Theodore, struts into the room. With his parents out of town, the arrogant brat invites his favorite fake cousin to breakfast. A wicked idea sparks in her mind, realizing this violent meathead is the perfect pawn. Flashing a manipulative smile, she casually asks her new henchman to take her on a little field trip. Meanwhile, halfway across the empire, absolute chaos is erupting at the royal palace. A terrifying voice echoes through the halls, promising certain doom to whoever is hiding. The notoriously strict tutor Mary is on a bloodthirsty rampage over skipped lessons. Kicking doors open like a medieval SWAT team, she screams for the second crown prince. She marches right past our girl's suite, assuming the royal troublemaker would never hide there. Turns out the mischievous prince is currently crouched behind our villainess's sofa, frantically begging for silence. He hits his bewildered host with a desperate, pleading whisper. Our girl just stares at this ridiculous royal squatter, completely unsure how to handle a hostage situation. Safely back inside the estate, our girl stares at her own reflection like a complete stranger. Her brain is currently buffering through everything that just happened. That intensely emotional rain hug with her bodyguard replays on a loop. Crying into his chest was undeniably the safest she has ever felt. Until the romantic fog finally cleared from her brain. Snapping back to reality, she awkwardly peeled herself off his broad shoulders. The poor knight just stared down at her with absolute devotion. Neither of them actually bothered to let go of each other's hands. She tried to formulate a coherent sentence to excuse her meltdown. Internally, she was screaming at herself for being so shamelessly clingy in public. Noah couldn't have cared less about the scandal, silently shielding her from the rain. His only priority was making sure his lady was okay. The heavy, painfully romantic tension completely swallowed them whole. Suddenly remembering she is supposed to be a terrifying villainess, panic set in. She literally sprinted away into the storm, leaving the poor guy totally bewildered. Now pacing her bedroom, the sheer humiliation is eating her alive. She aggressively bonks her own head, cursing her lack of emotional control. Even still, she cannot deny how comforting his massive arms felt. Figuring out how to ever look her hunky knight in the eye again feels impossible. She is fully prepared to just avoid him for the rest of eternity. Reaching for the doorknob, the mischievous second prince suddenly bursts inside. Her jaw drops at this blatant invasion of privacy. Stuttering, she tries to demand why a royal is breaking and entering. Instead of explaining, he urgently snatches her wrist. Flashing a wink, he casually drops his title and drags her across the rug. Totally bewildered, her brain just blindly accepts the kidnapping. She attempts to ask what on earth he is doing, but he aggressively yanks her straight down behind the velvet sofa. A split second later, the terrifying royal tutor marches into the room. The angry woman mutters that her runaway student obviously wouldn't be here. Our fake villainess sits completely frozen as Mary scans the empty suite. Leo leans in, whispering a desperate apology for holding her hostage. The frustrated tutor scoffs, officially giving up the manhunt. Annoyance flares up as our girl realizes she is harboring a royal fugitive. Thinking she is entirely alone, the strict teacher lets out a heavy sigh. And then she unleashes the most aggressively loud, horrific fart in recorded history. The dignified lady proudly sighs in relief, warning the empty room there is more coming. A chaotic symphony of absolute flatulence violently echoes through the bedroom. The endless barrage of gas sounds like a literal war zone. Trapped behind the couch, the two nobles are forced to endure this cursed acoustic concert. Their eyes are wide with sheer terror as the foul noises refuse to stop. Leo nearly bursts into laughter, but she violently clamps a hand over his mouth to save their lives. Finally finishing her business, Mary cheerfully vows to lay off the breakfast beans before waddling out. Peeking over the velvet cushions, she keeps the prince completely gagged. He tries to mumble against her palm, desperate to breathe. She aggressively shushes him, triple-checking that the toxic threat is truly gone. Confirming the coast is clear, they both let out a massive sigh of relief. She quickly yanks her hand away from the prince's face. And that is exactly when the invisible, radioactive cloud of stench violently assaults their nostrils. Leo completely loses his mind, howling with laughter at the biological weapon they just survived. Wiping tears from his eyes, he jokes about his uptight tutor's digestive issues. Gagging slightly, our girl decides they need to evacuate this crime scene immediately. She points out her actual bedroom is next door, hoping to escape the lingering smell. The mischievous royal gets a dangerously playful glint in his eye. Without any warning, he boldly scoops her right into his arms. Boot planted on the marble railing, he prepares for a highly illegal exit. He casually hurls them both off the balcony while she screams bloody murder. Waiting down in the courtyard, Noah happens to look up at the worst possible time. His protective knightly soul violently ejects from his body upon seeing his boss plummeting from the sky. Defying all laws of physics, the prince lands gracefully on the pavement like a superhero. Trembling in his arms, she furiously requests a heads-up before their next near-death experience. The angry tutor suddenly leans over the railing, having tracked down her missing student. Ignoring her furious screaming, Leo cheerfully declares it is time to run and completely books it. Safely escaping the estate, the two fugitives catch a fancy royal carriage ride. Staring out the window, a gorgeous field of golden sunflowers catches her eye. Leo softly points out how breathtaking the bright scenery is. But his eyes quickly shift away from the flowers and lock directly onto her. Basking in the sunlight, the fake villainess looks absolutely stunning. Reaching out, he gently tucks a stray strand of hair behind her ear. He smoothly hits her with a massive compliment, dialing his natural royal charm up to 11. Riding alongside the carriage, Noah is glaring at the flirty prince like a fiercely territorial guard dog. His grumpy brooding is interrupted by the sweet sound of genuine laughter. Glancing over, he watches his lady happily giggling at Leo's jokes. Seeing her finally relaxed and smiling instantly melts the knight's icy exterior. He decides that as long as she is happy, he can tolerate the annoying prince. The elegant carriage finally rolls up to the bustling capital gates. Stepping onto the lively streets, the two nobles prepare for a casual afternoon out. The prince flashes a charming grin, formally thanking her for aiding his great escape. She just laughs, brushing off her unintentional role as a criminal accomplice. Considering he rescued her from the garden party, they are officially even. Stepping into her personal space, his playful tone drops into something much softer. He smoothly asks if she would do him the absolute honor of spending the entire day together. Back in his gloomy bedroom, our favorite grumpy teenager is looking like a totally wrecked punching bag. Clutching his battered ribs, he violently shivers through the lingering pain of yesterday's unhinged beatdown. A sudden knock forces the edgy kid to quickly hide his bruised ego under the bedsheets. The heavy wooden door slowly creaks open to reveal the manor staff. A painfully polite butler announces that Big Brother Alexander is actively waiting by the carriage outside. Catching that last detail, Theodore's brain immediately snags on the mention of his fake sister's lethal bodyguard. The servants offer to help him change, but the stubborn noble violently grips his silk robe. Forcing his aching body out of bed, he masks his wincing with a terrifyingly cold glare. He coldly orders the entire staff out, preferring to suffer into his fancy clothes completely alone. Sometime later, the battered teenager is lurking out in the sunlit palace courtyard. His suspicious little mind is currently spiraling over why the crown prince dragged our girl to a private breakfast, wondering if Arthur magically discovered her massive identity theft operation. But if the royal family actually knew the truth, they would have executed her on the spot by now. Honestly, keeping this fake villainess around is the ultimate camouflage for his runaway sister's peaceful new life. Plus, this crying imposter is way easier to manipulate than the original toxic diva ever was. What really confuses him is why the mischievous second prince is suddenly hovering around her too. Is Leo totally clueless about the massive fraud currently infiltrating his family? Before he can crack the conspiracy, Alexander ruins the brooding session with an aggressively cheerful shoulder grab. The surprise hug hits directly on a fresh bruise, making the tough guy violently flinch. Alexander instantly switches into overprotective Big Brother mode, frantically asking what is wrong. Swatting the concern away, Theodore aggressively refuses to admit he got jumped by trust fund babies. He bitterly demands they just get in the carriage and leave this cursed palace immediately. Suddenly, a ridiculously cheerful blonde stranger struts over and completely ignores their personal space. He hits this random girl with the most intensely judgmental side-eye imaginable. And of course, this bubbly intruder is none other than our delusional, timeline-ruining fake heroine. Dripping with aristocratic attitude, he bluntly asks who gave this peasant permission to speak. But the smug teenage sass evaporates the exact second he scans the crowd behind her. Lurking right over her shoulder is the exact same violent meathead who kicked his ribs in yesterday. Cutting back to the city gates, Prince Leo is turning up the royal charm to dangerous levels. He smoothly propositions our fake villainess for a highly scandalous, completely unchaperoned day out. She just stares at the gorgeous redhead, utterly bewildered by the sudden date request. He teases her for staring at the city architecture with massive, sparkly cartoon eyes. She awkwardly agrees, silently panicking because this sprawling metropolis is totally new to her. Playing the sympathy card, he complains about his exhausting royal duties and begs for a mental health day. Hearing the word break instantly sets off a massive light bulb in her exhausted brain. She realizes her poor, intensely devoted bodyguard has literally never had a single day off. Plus, ditching her responsibilities means she doesn't have to face her traumatizing little brother back at the estate. Seizing the hesitation, the mischievous prince strikes while the iron is hot. Snatching her hand like a total romantic lead, he dramatically awaits her verdict. Practically begging this supposed villainess to go cause some absolute chaos in the streets. following it up with a cheeky wink and a very bold promise to be her personal shield. Lurking 3 steps behind them, Noah is currently radiating pure, homicidal bodyguard energy. The brooding knight silently scoffs, totally convinced his boss is immune to this cheap royal flirting. But when she cheerfully agrees to the date, Noah's loyal soul violently exits his body. Sending Leo off to buy pastries, she completely ignores the fact that her knight is currently having an internal crisis. Noah furiously glares at the retreating prince, entirely ready to shadow this scandalous date from the bushes. But his aggressive stalking plans are instantly destroyed when she casually dismisses him too. Asking about his employment history instantly sends the anxious giant straight into a paranoid panic attack. He stammers out their timeline, utterly terrified that he is getting fired in the middle of a cobblestone street. His brain jumps straight to the absolute worst conclusion about their emotional rain-soaked hug. While he mentally prepares for a tragic rejection, she gently praises him for being permanently glued to her side. Dropping the bomb, she officially orders the workaholic knight to go enjoy a desperately needed vacation. He stares at her in utter disbelief while she sweetly compliments his terrifyingly lethal protection skills. She admits feeling terribly guilty for treating him like a human security camera. Assuming he has a personal life, she tells him to go have fun, completely unaware that protecting her is his entire personality. He violently rejects this nonsense logic, completely devoted to this gorgeous menace. Looking away, the stubborn bodyguard mentally prepares to directly disobey a direct order. His voice drops into that dangerously serious, deeply protective tone. He practically recites his job description, vowing that abandoning her is completely out of the question. She just smiles at the massive, brooding wall of muscle refusing to leave. Reaching out, her delicate fingers gently wrap around his giant, battle-scarred hand. She starts to call him her trusted knight, before quickly changing her mind. Dropping an absolute nuke on his heart, she confesses that he means so much more to her than just a hired sword. But then she brutally friendzones him with a cheerful, devastating smile. Claiming she just wants to be besties completely shatters the intense romantic tension. Before Noah can process the emotional damage, the annoying prince yells from down the street. Waving a bag of freshly baked treats, Leo is entirely ready to steal his date. She happily waves back, leaving her crushed bodyguard suffocating in the friend zone. Tossing one last fond look at the stunned giant, she cheerfully skips away to go eat pastries with another man. The poor knight is left clutching thin air, his entire romantic fantasy crumbling to dust. That cursed word echoes through his brain like a painful, repetitive alarm bell. He stares blankly as the girl of his dreams walks away with a literal royal playboy. Being just a knight was supposed to be completely fine with him. And being a trusted friend should have been an incredible honor. His mind completely spirals, tracing exactly where he crossed the invisible line. The heartbreaking realization hits that holding her in the rain made him desperately greedy for her heart. Leaving our tragic, love-struck bodyguard entirely alone to suffer the consequences of his feelings. Alexander casually gestures to the strangers, asking his battered brother if they know each other. Flashing a terrifyingly fake smile, the violent meathead instantly switches into polite aristocrat mode. The two-faced bully formally shakes Alexander's hand, while Theodore watches his abuser play the perfect gentleman. Henry smoothly pivots the introduction to his blonde cousin, pretending they were just taking a lovely garden stroll. The absolute audacity of this guy acting like a friendly classmate is truly staggering. Pointing right at his recent punching bag, the arrogant brat mockingly praises Theodore as a certified prodigy. Stepping into the spotlight, the fake protagonist prepares to initiate her grand, romantic debut. She gracefully extends her hand, fully expecting this edgy teenager to eagerly kiss her knuckles. Instead of playing along, the grumpy noble completely ignores her existence and silently walks away. Completely mortified by his brother's attitude, Alexander swoops in to politely kiss her hand instead. The older brother scrambles to excuse the disrespect, awkwardly inviting them over for tea to make amends. Meanwhile, the sadistic bully watches Theodore retreat, knowing exactly why the kid is acting so weird. Switching gears, let's check in on our emotionally constipated crown prince. Arthur is currently soaking in a hot bath, totally lost in his own confusing thoughts. His mind helplessly wanders back to the moment he found his supposed worst enemy fast asleep. He caught himself shamelessly staring at her peaceful face, completely mesmerized by her beauty. Standing over her, his royal brain had basically flatlined into total silence. Gently adjusting her posture, he surprisingly decided to play the role of a caring gentleman. He carefully slid a soft cushion right beneath her heavy head, and properly tucked her in like she was made of fragile glass. The sweet moment shattered when he noticed fresh tears actively rolling down her cheeks. Mumbling in her sleep, she began desperately begging for her mother. The heartbreaking plea left the prince totally paralyzed by her bedside. He instantly realized there was some serious, unspoken trauma hiding behind her villainous reputation. Reaching out, he gently wiped the sorrow right off her sleeping face. Leaning dangerously close, he studied her features like a fascinating, unsolvable puzzle. And then he did the unthinkable, pressing a ridiculously tender kiss right to her forehead. Splashing water in his face, the present-day prince violently cringes at his own embarrassing romantic behavior. Flapping onto his mattress, he aggressively wonders why he is suddenly acting like a lovesick teenager. He desperately tries to blame this massive personality shift entirely on her, arguing that the toxic diva he grew up with would never act this fragile and sweet. She genuinely feels like a completely different person, right down to the way she speaks and smells. Nothing about this fake villainess matches the awful girl he was forced to endure. His paranoid mind wonders if this whole innocent act is just a twisted revenge plot for ignoring her. The horrifying possibility that she actually moved on and loves someone else makes his chest tight. He vividly remembers how vulnerable and gorgeous she looked with those tears in her eyes. Clutching his head, the poor guy officially accepts that he is completely losing his mind over his ex. The chaotic internal monologue is mercifully interrupted by a servant delivering his medicine. A cheerful butler praises the herbal bath before ordering the exhausted royal straight back to bed. He casually mentions turning away a very eager, unexpected guest at the door. Arthur's heart immediately leaps, frantically hoping our girl actually came to check on him. Pushing him back into the pillows, the butler regretfully informs him that Lady Lucia left hours ago. The mystery visitor actually goes by the name Lady Claristeria. The prince just blinks in utter confusion, having absolutely zero clue who that is. Meanwhile, the delusional imposter is happily treating the palace gardens like her own personal fanfiction. She practically skips through the roses, giddy to officially meet her destined prince and her favorite edgy side character. Thrilled that Theodore is acting exactly like the grumpy Spitfire from her cherished romance novel. She smugly predicts the traumatized kid will be blindly devoted to her in no time. Glancing around, she notes how handsome Alexander is before casually remembering he is destined to die soon. The cold-blooded sociopath just shrugs off his impending tragic death while sniffing a pretty flower. Back inside the estate, Alexander finally corners his moody little brother in the hallway. He sternly demands an explanation for that incredibly disrespectful stunt out in the garden. Suffocating under his own injuries, the battered teenager just desperately wants to lie down. Grabbing Theodore by his bruised shoulders, Alexander completely ignores his little brother's painful flinch. The older sibling unleashes a furious lecture, sick and tired of this endless arrogant teenage angst. He firmly orders the kid to drop the rebellious act and start following the rules, demanding that he finally starts acting like a proper, dignified heir to the Duke's family. Having delivered the harsh reality check, Alexander turns on his heel and storms off. Left completely alone, a single, heartbreaking tear rolls down Theodore's bruised cheek. Back in the royal bedroom, the confused prince asks the butler to repeat that random name. Pouring the medicine, the servant explains that the Marquis's niece practically demanded an audience based on a childhood playdate. Apparently, Arthur left quite the impression on this delusional debutante who just moved to the capital. The exhausted royal physically recoils in disgust, having absolutely zero memory of this Claire girl. Desperate to change the subject, he pivots right back to obsessing over our girl's whereabouts. The butler gently reminds him that his ex-fiancée happily skipped town with his mischievous younger brother. The servant is genuinely shocked Arthur slept through the screaming when those two lunatics jumped out the window. His royal brain completely flatlines trying to process that highly illegal balcony exit. Meanwhile, our fugitive duo is casually strolling through the bustling capital streets. Leo cheerfully announces a festival, prompting a very confused question that instantly exposes her fake identity. Realizing the original Villainess lived here her entire life, she awkwardly pretends she just forgot. He sweetly explains that it is a massive public holiday to kick off the summer harvest. Warning her that the real chaos starts after sunset, he smoothly reserves the very first dance. He hits her with a dangerously charming wink to seal the romantic deal. Suddenly, his playful royal persona vanishes as a dark look crosses his face. Ordering her to stay put, he claims he is just grabbing them some festive drinks. Left entirely alone in the crowd, she genuinely considers just sprinting into the woods to escape her problems. Or maybe she should just elope with a random hot guy to dodge all the upcoming drama. Her mind instantly drifts to her massive, devoted bodyguard, who would probably agree to treason in a heartbeat. A horrific thought suddenly slams the brakes on her spontaneous runaway bride fantasy. Panic sets in as she realizes she never actually asked her hunky knight about his relationship status. She tries to convince herself that someone that aggressively brooding definitely has to be single. Aggressively gaslighting herself, she falsely claims she doesn't care about his romantic life at all. She forces herself to remember that they are strictly platonic besties and totally not crushing on each other. Taking a deep breath, she just enjoys the glorious freedom of being a total nobody in this fictional city. Looking around at the vibrant festival, she wonders how her author friend ever imagined this incredible world. A heavy wave of homesickness hits as she desperately misses her creative best friend. The melancholic vibe is instantly cured by a tiny hand tugging at her dress. An incredibly adorable little girl shyly offers up a fistful of crushed wildflowers. Crouching down, our fake villainess completely melts over the precious gift. She warmly promises to put the makeshift bouquet to very good use. Meanwhile, Prince Leo is over at the busy tavern ordering innocent orange juice next to a highly suspicious stranger. The cloaked man notes that the royal is looking suspiciously happy today. Leo just flashes his signature smirk, bragging that causing absolute chaos is basically his full-time job. The sketchy informant offers a heavily layered, deeply insincere congratulation, before dropping a chillingly vague warning about remembering their actual mission. Grabbing the beverages, the two-faced prince smoothly ditches the shady alleyway meeting. Strolling back through the festival, that dark, scheming expression entirely takes over his face. But the sinister plotting comes to a screeching halt when he finally spots his date. Our notorious villainess is currently giggling in the dirt, absolutely swarmed by a pack of adorable children. All the royal scheming melts away, replaced by a totally genuine, love-struck smile. He finally realizes exactly why his stubborn older brother is suddenly so obsessed with her. Wandering through the bustling festival, a brutally honest vendor aggressively critiques our girl's outfit. Slipping into a gorgeous white gown, she earns a ridiculously soft compliment from the prince while passing locals mistake them for a married couple. We get a full-blown rom-com montage of the duo playing hero for a stranded animal. The prince happily plays the role of a devoted boyfriend, playfully roasting her more questionable fashion choices. They spend the afternoon lounging in the grass, just soaking in the peaceful golden hour. Before they even realize it, the vibrant sunset fades into a gorgeous summer night. The festival completely transforms under the magical glow of the starry sky. They even share a ridiculously romantic dance right in the middle of the crowded square. Eventually, the exhausted duo seeks refuge at a lively outdoor tavern. A very impressive waiter expertly balances a massive tray of foaming pints. Genuinely touched by the amazing day, she drops his formal title entirely, which immediately earns her a cheeky, teasing smirk. Handing over a sweet beverage, he gently warns her about the alcohol, but she foolishly assumes she can handle her fantasy world liquor. Cut to 10 minutes later, and our girl is completely wasted, loudly singing pub songs to anyone who will listen. The alcohol hits her like a freight train, leaving her crumpled on the cobblestones while Leo rushes over in a panic. He frantically tries to scoop her up, heavily regretting letting her chug that drink. Staring up at him with massive, flushed cheeks, she is officially in the giggly drunk phase. Completely ignoring his concern, she affectionately squishes the prince's handsome face between her hands, letting out the most adorable, unhinged little giggle. Despite being absolutely plastered, she still manages to look devastatingly gorgeous under the moonlight. The notoriously smooth playboy is left completely flustered, desperately trying to talk her out of ordering another round of strawberry beer. Realizing she is an absolute menace, he orders her to stay firmly planted on the ground. He promises to be right back with a massive cup of sobering water, leaving the highly intoxicated noblewoman completely unsupervised in a dark alley, which is exactly when a terrifyingly familiar voice echoes from the shadows. The exact same street thugs from her first day in the capital suddenly surround her. The grumpy leader points an accusing finger, and our drunk girl hilariously points right back. Smirking at her defenseless state, the thug mocks her for missing her giant, brooding guard dog. Before he can finish his villain monologue, a flying object violently smacks him right in the face. Our unhinged queen just weaponized her own shoe, fiercely declaring that nobody insults her favorite knight. Wiping blood from his nose, the furious criminal demands to know if she has a death wish. Completely unbothered, she aggressively launches her second shoe for a flawless double tap. Standing barefoot under the moon like a feral goddess, she boldly challenges the entire gang to a fistfight. The hardened criminals are completely paralyzed by this insane display of drunken confidence. Snatching a massive wooden plank, she wildly charges at the terrified men like an absolute psycho. Screaming for their lives, the thugs sprint away from the completely unhinged noblewoman. The panicked gang violently bursts into the crowded tavern to escape her wrath, practically trampling over the second prince on their way to safety. Blinking in confusion, he peers out the tavern doors into the alleyway. The glass of water slips right through his fingers upon seeing the aftermath. The fearless warrior is back on the ground, groaning because she tripped over her own bare feet. Pouting at the dirt, the adrenaline crash hits her like a brick wall. Kneeling beside her, Leo chuckles that she definitely didn't need any rescuing. Joking that he should have saved the thugs, he is completely caught off guard when she suddenly tackles him into a massive hug. The giggly drunk phase officially expires, instantly replaced by heavy, dramatic sobbing. Burying her face in his chest, she lets out a heartbreaking wail that instantly kills his teasing mood. Frantically asking what hurts, he is stunned when she tearfully confesses that today was just incredibly happy. For the very first time in this cursed novel, she didn't have to pretend to be a toxic villainess. The absolute relief of just acting like a normal girl completely breaks her down. Trembling in his arms, the alcohol strips away every single one of her emotional filters. She desperately babbles about her traumatizing first days in this world, swearing she never lied to anyone. Reliving the horrific asylum treatment, she complains about Alexander aggressively pumping her full of glowing green sedatives. Still terrified by that creepy royal physician who treated her like a literal mental patient, Leo gently strokes her hair, totally clueless about the context but fiercely validating her pain anyway. Desperately gripping his jacket, she begs him to believe that she isn't actually insane, whispering a fragile, broken promise that she is telling the truth. Totally exhausted by the emotional dump, her heavy head slumps against his shoulder. A terrifying realization chokes her words, knowing that exposing her fake identity means certain death. Stripped of all her defenses, she finally admits the one thing she truly desires. The gentle prince scoops her up, softly promising to carry her right back to the estate. But she weakly shakes her head, rejecting the luxurious royal mansion. Looking up with devastated eyes, she shatters his heart by begging to go back to a reality he cannot ever reach. Back at the royal estate, a frantic voice screams for the missing Villainess. Alexander practically gets whiplash turning toward the commotion in the courtyard. He spots the second prince casually piggybacking his giggling, highly intoxicated sister. The protective older brother immediately starts scolding the royal for enabling this scandalous behavior. Oblivious to the tension, our drunk queen squishes Alexander's cheeks and brags about how cute he is. Her messy, affectionate rambling is brutally interrupted by our favorite grumpy teenager. Blinking through the alcoholic haze, she cheerfully roasts Theodore right to his face. The edgy kid instantly fires up, deeply offended by the blatant disrespect. Before he can unleash a bratty tantrum, she aggressively grabs his bruised cheeks. Squinting closely, she examines his grumpy little face like a fascinating science experiment. Declaring him officially adorable, she graciously pardons his terrible attitude for the night. Then she casually drops the horrifying fun fact that he recently threatened her life. Alexander's overprotective brain completely short-circuits at that massive accusation. He aggressively rounds on the teenager, demanding to know why he is terrorizing his traumatized sibling. Leaping to her attempted murderer's defense, the drunk girl fiercely orders him to stop yelling. She cheerfully insists that Theodore actually had a perfectly valid reason for planning her execution. Pulling the stiff teenager into a sloppy hug, she claims Alexander would have done the exact same thing. And then she drops a massive, treasonous nuclear bomb right in the middle of the hallway. Absolute, horrifying silence descends as the men try to process her confession about being a fake. Panic mode activates as Theodore violently clamps his hand over her blabbering mouth. Desperately doing damage control, he blames the treason on the alcohol and drags her away. Hissing at her to shut up, he completely stuns Alexander by actually calling her his sister. Wrestling the squirming drunkard down the hall, he seriously questions his own life choices. Lugging this chaotic fake villainess around is entirely too much work for one teenager, especially since his ribs are still screaming in agony from yesterday's vicious beatdown. The physical pain combined with the massive stress finally forces him to stop. Our favorite grumpy boy just slumps miserably onto the cold stone floor. Alexander's harsh lecture about acting like a proper, perfect heir echoes in his head. It perfectly overlaps with the original Villainess screaming those exact same toxic expectations at him, constantly being reminded that he is nothing more than a political tool for the Duke's family. Crushed under the heavy aristocratic pressure, his fragile self-esteem completely shatters. As the quiet tears fall, a surprisingly gentle hand brushes against his bruised cheek. The plastered fake sister kneels down, softly promising that everything is going to be fine. She hushes his tragic breakdown with the kind of maternal warmth he desperately needed. Wrapping him in a tight embrace, her empathetic drunk tears totally blindside the kid. She softly begs him to stop hurting, completely dropping any trace of hostility. Gently rubbing his back, she finally gives him the unconditional comfort his actual family never did. Calling him a good kid is the exact magical phrase needed to break down his tough walls. For the very first time, the traumatized teenager surrenders and genuinely accepts her affection. The beautiful, emotionally healing moment is instantly ruined by the sound of light snoring. Our unhinged queen has completely blacked out and slipped into a ridiculous fruit-themed wonderland, currently riding a giant, magical strawberry through the majestic fields of her own subconscious. Fast forward to the harsh morning light violently assaulting her hungover retinas. Her brain painfully reboots, trying to process why her mattress feels incredibly hard and cold. Peeling her face off the carpet, she realizes she spent the entire night sleeping on the floor. A massive wail of absolute regret echoes through the estate, deeply amusing a certain royal guest. Clutching her throbbing head, the mortifying flashbacks of her drunken escapade start trickling in. Getting completely trashed with the mischievous second prince was basically a diplomatic suicide mission. A nervous maid knocks on the door, interrupting her tragic spiral of shame. Apparently, her royal drinking buddy is currently waiting downstairs for a cozy breakfast date. Pure terror strikes her heart upon realizing the absolute menace hasn't gone home yet. Pacing the balcony, she frantically tries to construct a formal apology for acting like a feral gremlin. A cold sweat breaks out as she desperately prays she kept her massive identity theft a secret, cursing that sneaky strawberry beer for tasting exactly like harmless fruit juice. Right on cue, the devastatingly handsome prince smoothly crashes her mental breakdown. Flashing that signature playful smirk, he cheerfully wishes the hungover mess a good morning. She fumbles through a respectful greeting, but he casually insists they are strictly on a first-name basis now. Closing the distance between them, his intense proximity immediately sets off her internal alarm bells. Leaning in, he shamelessly turns on the romantic charm to maximum levels. Gently covering her hand with his, he completely ignores her clumsy, flustered apologies. He warmly assures her that seeing her beautiful face is worth absolutely any weight. And then he casually drops her real, secret name with a terrifyingly sweet smile. Her soul violently flatlines, realizing her drunken mouth just ruined her entire survival plan. Desperately backtracking, our girl claims she was just pulling a hilarious prank. She frantically plays dumb, hoping the prince buys her sudden amnesia act. She accidentally hops onto the balcony railing and completely eats herself off the second story. The panicked royal lunges forward, terrified she just ended her own life. Hitting the dirt, her dramatic escape plan is ruined by a painfully bruised backside. He frantically rushes over, demanding to know if anything is broken. Rubbing the sore spot, she absent-mindedly complains about her aching rear end. Her brain immediately hits the brakes upon realizing how incredibly unladylike that sounded. Clearing her throat, she scrambles to deploy some fancy aristocratic vocabulary. She proudly declares her bottom is perfectly unharmed. Fighting back a massive grin, he watches her awkwardly admit to a few scratches. The sheer absurdity of the situation finally breaks his princely composure. He politely attempts to agree, but his shoulders are actively vibrating. Utterly defeated, our girl sighs and gives him permission to openly mock her. The royal floodgates open as he absolutely loses his mind laughing at her awkwardness. Fast forward to breakfast, where this menace is still ruthlessly roasting her tragic landing. Wiping a tear from his eye, he shamelessly blames her for being too fun to tease. She heavily weaponizes his formal title, earning a cheeky pout in response. And then he casually drops her secret real name like it is absolutely nothing. He playfully complains that she begged him to use a nickname last night. She stammers out an apology before awkwardly switching back to his first name. Internally screaming, she tries to pass the slip-up off as a simple childhood nickname. Leaning forward, the observant prince notes how suspicious she is acting today. He cheekily asks if he gets exclusive nickname rights, referencing her feral shoe-throwing incident. Avoiding eye contact, she grumbles a reluctant confirmation just to shut him up. A highly satisfied smirk spreads across his handsome face. The genuine warmth in his voice catches her completely off guard. Slicing his food, he happily declares that her new name suits her perfectly. A massive wave of relief crashes over her as the flimsy excuse actually works. Fishing for damage control, she cautiously asks if she did anything else embarrassing. His mysterious, highly playful response instantly spikes her anxiety. He casually claims she tried to kiss him. She frantically denies the assault, while he smoothly corrects the narrative. Her brain short-circuits at how effortlessly this guy twists every single conversation. Learning she actually punched a royal sends the remaining tea shooting straight out her nose. He absolutely loses it, playfully mocking her bright red, strawberry-like face. Strolling through the gardens later, she politely thanks him for lugging her drunk self home. The shocking revelation that she actively bit a prince stops her dead in her tracks. Her dignity officially flatlines as she whimpers a pathetic apology. But the absolute madman just smiles, admitting he doesn't regret a thing. He points out that this chaotic, fun version of her is a massive upgrade. Assuming the crown prince noticed too, he brings up Arthur's suspicious reluctance to break up. Warning her to stay alert, he hints that his older brother might be catching feelings. She immediately shuts that down, utterly convinced the royal jerk still hates her. A very noticeable wave of relief washes over the mischievous redhead. His playful demeanor vanishes, replaced by a dangerously intense stare. The heavy silence stretches out as he locks eyes with our clueless queen. Resuming the walk, he smoothly confesses how much he enjoys their chaotic hangouts. He gently points out that marrying his brother would permanently ruin their fun dynamic. Arthur is notoriously possessive, and definitely wouldn't allow his wife to hang out with other men. Dropping an absolute bombshell, Leo smoothly admits he hates sharing too. The heavy romantic implication leaves her completely speechless. Recovering her sass, she firmly declares that she isn't a shiny toy for royal brothers to fight over. She expertly friendzones him by demanding to know why a hypothetical marriage would ruin their friendship. The prince arches an eyebrow at the sudden, highly convenient platonic label. Spinning around, she faces the gorgeous royal with absolute determination. Even while trying to be stern, she cannot deny how ridiculously handsome he looks. Refusing to back down, she challenges him to deny their new bestie status. Flashing a highly amused smirk, he gracefully accepts his place in the friend zone. Declining a comfy carriage ride back, he opts to take his horse instead. With a polite bow, the charming prince prepares to make his grand exit. She awkwardly yanks her fingers away right before his lips can make contact. Blaming her dodge on their new friendship, she internally shudders at the creepy noble hand-kissing tradition. Asserting her boundaries completely backfires when he smoothly plants a kiss right on her cheek instead. Cheerfully agreeing to her terms, he leaves our girl standing there like a blushing statue. Swinging onto his stallion, he throws her own platonic label right back at her. Rubbing her cheek, she grumbles about this royal playboy absolutely refusing to take a hint. The handsome troublemaker disappears down the scenic dirt path. Away from prying eyes, the cheerful facade instantly drops. He turns that forbidden nickname over in his sharp, calculating mind, confirming his massive suspicion that this girl is absolutely not the original Lucia. He mentally replays every single chaotic thing she did during the festival, pondering exactly why an imposter would choose such a ridiculously similar name. He knows for a fact that she is actively running a massive identity theft operation, instead of planning to expose her treason to the royal court. A deeply sinister, scheming smile creeps across his handsome face. He begins plotting exactly how to weaponize this fake villainess for his own royal agenda. Watching the royal playboy disappear into the woods, her brain struggles to match him with his actual reputation. It is impossible to picture this carefree, strawberry-loving goofball as the notoriously ruthless general from the novel. Still, his terrifyingly accurate interrogation skills definitely spiked her heart rate. For a split second, she genuinely thought her massive identity theft secret had slipped out. But the most disturbing part is the chilling realization that she looks exactly like the original Villainess. Getting totally wasted and blabbing her secrets to a dangerous prince was a massive diplomatic disaster. Because if the truth about her fake royal status actually gets out, the novel's original plot won't even matter. The entire empire will happily execute her for impersonating the crown prince's fiancé. Theodore's incredibly dark, treason-themed threat violently echoes in her mind. But the memory of the angry teenager immediately pivots to their surprisingly soft, tear-soaked hug from last night. Deciding she desperately needs answers, she sets off to confront her grumpy little brother. Back inside the grand estate, the friendly maid Linda politely asks if the visiting prince has already departed. Our girl confirms he just rode off into the sunset, then points out the tray of food in Linda's hands. The sweet maid sighs, explaining she is trying to deliver a late breakfast to the stubbornly isolated young master. Apparently, the moody teenager locked himself in his study after feeling sick yesterday. Linda worries that his notoriously awful appetite is getting significantly worse lately. Hoping he will at least force down some warm soup, she prepares to march upstairs. Sensing a perfect opportunity, our fake villainess cheerfully swoops in and intercepts the silver tray. She smoothly orders the exhausted maid to go take a well-deserved break. Claiming she was already on her way to see Theodore, she volunteers for breakfast delivery duty. Leaving the stunned servant standing in the hallway, she marches off toward the teenager's study. Linda watches her notoriously toxic boss actually perform an act of kindness. A massive, proud smile completely takes over the sweet maid's face. She beams at the retreating girl, thrilled to see the villainess acting like a proper, caring older sister. Arriving at the heavy wooden door, she takes a massive, anxiety-reducing breath. She knocks politely, requesting a quick chat about their very messy family dynamics. Met with absolute silence, she bravely invites herself right into the lion's den. Wandering into the dim room, she immediately senses something is horribly wrong. She quickly dumps the breakfast tray onto a nearby table. Scanning the quiet study, she calls out for the grumpy teenager. A horrifying sight on the carpet instantly stops her heart. She rushes over to find her little brother crumpled on the floor, burning up with a massive fever and covered in fresh bruises. The stubborn kid aggressively demands she get out of his room immediately. Ignoring his bratty attitude, she frantically insists he needs a doctor right now. Turning to run for help, a weak but desperate hand violently snatches her wrist. He glares up at her, fiercely ordering her to keep her mouth entirely shut about his injuries. She frantically tries to argue, pointing out that he is literally bleeding on the rug, but he stubbornly forces himself to play the arrogant noble card one last time. Struggling to breathe, he attempts to use his aristocratic authority to command her silence. The pathetic attempt completely fails as his bruised body finally shuts down and he blacks out. Panic spikes as she violently shakes the unconscious boy, desperately screaming his name, praying he hasn't completely bled out on her watch. Somehow wrestling his heavy body onto the sofa, she quickly covers his shivering frame with a thick blanket. Staring down at his battered face, She wonders who exactly had the guts to violently jump a high-ranking noble. Lifting his shirt, she mentally diagnoses his nasty purple bruises, relieved to find his ribs are only bruised, not broken. Checking for internal bleeding, she thankfully concludes his injuries aren't currently life-threatening. She lets out a massive, shaky sigh of absolute relief. Hovering over him, she studies his soft, peaceful face without the usual grumpy scowl. His bright blue eyes are currently hidden under heavy, exhausted lids. She gently brushes his golden blonde hair completely off his burning forehead. A heartbreaking realization hits as she notes he is the exact same age her unborn baby brother would have been. Wandering out to the scenic palace lake, her brain spirals over the massive conspiracy happening right under her nose. Seriously, who on earth is powerful enough to violently assault the Duke's son without any consequences? And why is he stubbornly protecting her massive secret while simultaneously hiding his own brutal injuries? The emotional whiplash of this toxic, wildly protective family dynamic is seriously messing with her head. She mentally demands a one-way ticket right back to her boring, non-lethal reality, before she completely loses herself in this glamorous, deeply traumatizing fantasy world, before she genuinely stops wanting to leave these chaotic people behind. Hours later, the bright afternoon completely fades into a gorgeous, quiet evening. Our tragically friend-zoned bodyguard is currently replaying the worst moment of his entire life. That devastatingly cheerful smile is practically burned into his retinas. And then that annoying royal playboy just had to open his mouth. Watching her happily wave goodbye completely shattered his devoted heart, leaving him stranded in the middle of the street like a discarded puppy. That cursed platonic label is echoing endlessly in his traumatized brain. Suddenly, we are transported far away to a completely different, much cozier story. A dramatic tale of a beautiful princess getting snatched by a terrifying dragon, with a brave knight swooping in to save the day. Turns out this epic fantasy is just two adorable kids fighting over casting roles in their backyard. A sweet old man chuckles, playfully reminding the grumpy kid that dragons can be nice too. The little boy aggressively interrogates his uncle on his mythical creature expertise, but the playful debate is instantly paused by a very welcome distraction. The little girl squeals in absolute delight as our favorite brooding knight casually strolls up. Dropping the tough guy act, he pulls his tiny siblings into a massive bear hug. They dramatically weep about how much they miss their giant older brother, scolding him for making them wait so long for a visit. Immediately weaponizing his return to successfully negotiate a delayed bedtime, they start violently listing off an impossible, sugar-fueled itinerary of midnight activities. Fast forward 5 minutes, and the chaotic gremlins have completely passed out on his lap. He chuckles at their absolute failure to survive the legendary all-nighter. His adoptive uncle steps in to peel the sleeping kids off the exhausted knight. Cradling the youngest baby, Noah softly marvels at how insanely fast these kids are growing. Pressing a sweet kiss to the toddler's forehead, he jokes that he is going to need stronger arms soon. Returning to the room, the uncle reminisces about finding Noah wandering around at that exact same age. The sweet family moment gets a little heavy as the older man asks for a search update. Sadly, despite his incredibly distinct white hair, every single orphanage came up completely empty. Desperate for any scrap of lore, he begs to know if he was found with any hidden items. Literally anything that could point him toward his biological family, and solve the massive mystery of where he actually came from. Tragically, little Noah showed up with 0 identifying objects and severe amnesia. The brooding knight admits his only clues are a series of incredibly hazy, weird dreams. The older man gently asks him to unpack this subconscious trauma. He describes a horrific, fiery disaster and a desperate woman shielding him from the flames, quietly guessing that the protective stranger was his actual mom. But he quickly backtracks, aggressively gaslighting himself into thinking it is just a nightmare. A massive wave of guilt hits him for digging into his past when his adoptive family is so great. He practically begs his uncle not to think he is ungrateful for this warm, loving home. Thankfully, the sweet old man totally understands the need for closure and sends him off to bed. Collapsing onto the mattress, the massive knight finally gets to rest his exhausted eyes. But his brain immediately plunges right back into that exact same fiery, chaotic memory. Desperate voices scream over the roaring flames, begging someone to save the child. A woman's tearful voice frantically promises to always watch over him, declaring her eternal love right before the tragic flashback fades to black. His eyes snap open, completely haunted by this recurring tragic backstory. Rubbing his face, he lets out a heavy, incredibly tired sigh. Looking down, he realizes the tiny backyard gremlins somehow snuck into his bed overnight. He gently scolds the sleeping kids for attempting to freeze to death without blankets. Knowing a tearful goodbye will absolutely ruin him, he decides to pull a stealthy exit, dropping a massive pile of gold coins on the table to financially support his favorite people. Our favorite loyal knight saddles up and rides straight back to his noble duties. Snapping back to the present day, His long journey ends right at the sleeping Villainess. Basking in the soft moonlight, she looks absolutely angelic passed out on the bench. All of his brooding anxiety completely melts into a ridiculously soft, hopelessly devoted smile. His heart basically does backflips at the sight of his favorite chaotic noble. Peeling off his heavy leather gloves, he prepares to gently scoop her up. But he literally cannot resist tucking a tiny, delicate flower right behind her ear. He catches himself nearly admitting exactly how much he missed her. Suddenly, a massive, suppressed memory violently crashes into his brain. He completely freezes, staring down at her lips in absolute horror. Mentally rewinding all the way back to their very first, highly dramatic meeting. Back when he had absolutely zero clue this girl was going to completely ruin his life. The memory of pulling her unconscious body out of the water clicks into place. He frantically remembers trying to wake her up while she was actively drowning. The sheer panic of realizing she had completely stopped breathing, and the emergency medical procedure he was forced to perform to save her. His entire face burns beet red as he realizes CPR means he technically already stole her first kiss. Our tragically friend-zoned bodyguard is currently blushing over a suppressed memory of almost kissing his boss. Desperately trying to shake the romantic thoughts, he violently scrambles to his feet. He aggressively scolds himself for harboring such dangerously unprofessional fantasies. But his internal panic attack is interrupted when something in the dark catches his eye. Completely losing his footing, the massive, highly trained warrior somehow manages to trip over thin air. He violently tumbles backward, crashing straight into the freezing lake like a total amateur. The massive, ungraceful splash instantly startles our girl right out of her peaceful nap. She blinks through the darkness, wildly looking around for the source of the chaos. Her sleepy gaze finally lands on the rippling surface of the nearby water. Sitting right on the muddy bank is a tiny, incredibly round little frog. She jokingly questions how a creature the size of an apple just made a cannonball splash. The grumpy little amphibian just stares back, looking deeply unimpressed by her late-night comedy routine. Silently praying for a miracle, she desperately hopes she isn't expected to kiss the slimy creature. But then a deep, highly embarrassed human voice echoes straight from the water. Her brain completely short-circuits trying to figure out if the frog just spoke to her. The mystery is instantly solved when Noah rises from the lake with the frog perched perfectly on his head. She stares at her completely drenched, incredibly miserable-looking bodyguard. A massive burst of laughter escapes her lips at the sight of his ridiculous amphibious hat. The handsome bodyguard just lets her ruthlessly tease him, completely mesmerized by her gorgeous smile. He softly admits that being the butt of her joke is entirely worth it. Catching pneumonia is a totally acceptable price to pay if it means hearing her laugh. She quickly ignores his romantic swooning to drape a warm coat over his soaking wet shoulders. She sweetly insists that her favorite knight absolutely cannot afford to get sick. The familiar heavy material instantly triggers a memory as Noah wraps the fabric around himself. She proudly announces she is finally returning the coat he gave her on their very first meeting. That specific detail instantly triggers a massive wave of knightly guilt. He takes a deep breath and seriously announces that he has a major confession to make. He smoothly drops the bombshell that their garden encounter wasn't actually their first meeting. Pure panic floods her system as she wonders if the original toxic Villainess previously bullied him. But he quickly clarifies that they actually met when she was actively drowning. Her jaw drops in absolute shock at this massive plot twist. She frantically demands more details about this terrifying near-death experience. He explains pulling her unconscious body out of a random forest lake weeks before they formally met. The weirdest part was that she literally materialized out of thin air before hitting the water. He describes dragging her to shore, noting her incredibly strange, foreign clothing. This loyal golden retriever actually guarded her sleeping body in the freezing woods all night. He just patiently waited for her to wake up so he could safely escort her back to civilization. The poor guy was totally oblivious to the fact that she was a high-ranking noblewoman at the time. The anxious giant sweats bullets, fully preparing for her to call him a massive creep. But his strict knightly honor absolutely refuses to let him hide the truth anymore. He nervously stammers out a confession about attempting CPR right before she magically woke up. He frantically clarifies that his lips were strictly professional, while her brain connects this to the exact day she teleported into the novel. The poor guy violently backpedals, nervously arguing that kissing her wouldn't be the worst thing ever. He completely fumbles the romantic bag, stuttering that he actually wouldn't mind doing it again. While he absolutely dies of embarrassment, she is busy having a massive epiphany. The mysterious stranger who dragged her into this fictional universe was actually Noah all along. She throws her arms around his soaking wet neck, totally overwhelmed by this incredible revelation. Her brilliant little mind realizes this massive golden retriever is her literal ticket home. He is the only person on Earth who knows exactly where that magical portal lake is. She pulls back and flashes him the most devastatingly beautiful, grateful smile. She sweetly calls him a wonderful man, completely ignoring his frantic, stuttering apologies. The massive, brooding warrior instantly turns the color of a ripe tomato. She lovingly claims him as her absolute favorite knight in the entire world. This absolute queen officially destroys his remaining brain cells by pressing a sweet kiss right to his cheek. She casually drops a late-night kitchen invite before happily skipping away. The poor knight is left completely frozen in absolute shock. His brain violently short-circuits over that innocent little cheek kiss. The terrifying possibility that she actually likes him back sends his anxiety through the roof. His body physically betrays him with a sudden, violent attack of nervous hiccups. Safely back in his room, our love-struck bodyguard intensely debates over a tiny gift. He aggressively doubts if a fancy noblewoman would even appreciate cheap weeds, knowing full well he cannot afford the luxury roses she actually deserves. His toxic inferiority complex bitterly reminds him of his lowly place in society. But the memory of her soft lips immediately hijacks his entire nervous system. He violently clutches his own head, genuinely wondering how she can be so casually lethal. Treating his own employer like a romantic interest is a ridiculously dangerous game, because one small taste of her affection is already making him dangerously greedy. Meanwhile, our clueless queen is safely back in her own lavish bedroom. She enjoys a massive, highly satisfying stretch after a long day of surviving this novel. A tiny, unexpected detail in the mirror suddenly catches her attention. Leaning in close, she discovers the secret little wildflower neatly tucked behind her ear. Her heart does a massive backflip upon realizing her grumpy knight actually has a sweet side. Fast forward to the kitchen, where she has whipped up a surprisingly gourmet midnight snack. She desperately hopes her massive bodyguard appreciates the homemade culinary effort. Staring at the chaotic mountain of dirty dishes completely ruins her proud chef moment. Refusing to serve her favorite guy on cheap tableware, she hunts for the fancy china. She spots the absolute perfect platter shining like a beacon of hope. Of course, it is stored on the absolute highest, most inconvenient shelf possible. She foolishly balances on a wobbly wooden chair and stretches her arms to the absolute limit. Her fingertips lightly brush against the expensive porcelain edge. Tasting sweet victory just milliseconds before absolute disaster strikes. The treacherous piece of furniture violently shifts right out from under her feet. The fancy plate slips from her grasp as gravity aggressively takes over. The wooden legs kick out, completely sealing her tragic fate. Pure panic floods her system as the floor rushes up to meet her. Squeezing her eyes shut, she violently braces for a shattered tailbone. A blurry, frantic shadow suddenly launches across the kitchen tiles. Our favorite loyal knight swoops in and snatches her right out of midair. She desperately clings to his massive shoulders like a terrified koala bear. He breathlessly gasps her name, absolutely terrified he was a second too late, frantically inspecting her for injuries while literally bench-pressing her body weight. The intense physical proximity instantly fries whatever romantic brain cells he had left. She flashes a cheeky smile, casually praising his impressive superhero reflexes. He slowly lowers her feet to the ground like she is made of fragile glass. His eyes dart up to her messy hair, his face currently burning brighter than the kitchen stove. His deep voice drops into that intensely protective, scolding tone. He fiercely begs her to be careful while entirely forgetting to actually release her waist, warning her about the fall while actively ignoring how dangerously romantic this moment feels. Moving entirely away from the fluff, we drop straight into some sinister royal tension. The notoriously mischievous second prince is casually wiping fresh blood off a massive hunting knife. A cold, dangerously angry voice suddenly echoes from the dark doorway. Smoothly sliding the lethal weapon out of sight, Leo turns to face his furious older brother. He dials the sarcasm up to 11, mockingly bowing to the emotionally constipated crown prince, playfully asking why the golden boy is creeping around the estate at midnight. Arthur cuts right to the chase, aggressively interrogating him about his highly suspicious sleepover. The redhead just smirks, deeply enjoying this unhinged display of royal jealousy. He violently hits a nerve by pointing out that Arthur is actually obsessing over his ex, swirling the conversation. Leo pretends to be totally baffled by the sudden interrogation, ruthlessly pointing out that Arthur basically ignored his fiancée for years until just now. The crown prince violently loses his patience, demanding a straight answer about our girl. Leo openly mocks the great future king for losing sleep over a little dating scandal, shrugging off the outrage like it is just some trivial high society gossip. Arthur fiercely commands respect, throwing his entire royal authority around to officially claim her. He viciously demands that his little brother treat the villainess like literal royalty. His territorial instincts completely take over, banning Leo from ever speaking her name again. The younger prince just rolls his eyes at this pathetic display of possessiveness. Pushed entirely past his breaking point, Arthur violently grabs his brother by the collar. Spitting absolute venom, he promises severe consequences for crossing this romantic line. Completely unbothered by the physical threat, Leo prepares to drop a massive nuclear bomb. Smirking like a true menace, he brutally reveals that the highly contested engagement is already dead. Staring down the furious crown prince, Leo absolutely revels in his older brother's jealous meltdown. The mischievous redhead sarcastically asks if he should be offering his royal congratulations, reminding the golden boy that escaping a loveless political marriage was supposed to be a victory. Defeated by the brutal logic, Arthur slowly releases his iron grip on the prince's collar. Adjusting his wrinkled shirt, Leo smoothly points out how incredibly lucky his brother actually is, ruthlessly reminding Arthur that he spent years actively despising his supposed fiancé, leaving the crown prince to violently choke on the undeniable truth that his feelings have changed. The cheeky troublemaker strolls away, leaving the emotionally constipated royal entirely speechless in the dark. Utterly destroyed by the confrontation, Arthur lets out a miserable, frustrated sigh. Meanwhile, a much more wholesome romance is currently unfolding back in the kitchen. Our massively flustered knight is still bench-pressing our girl, totally frozen in romantic panic. She awkwardly breaks the tension, politely asking him to grab the fancy china. Gravity aggressively answers for her, sending the heavy porcelain crashing directly onto his forehead. Absolute chaos ensues as she frantically inspects her poor bodyguard for a major concussion. Brushing back his silver hair, she cringes at the nasty purple bump forming on his skin. Letting out a massive sigh of defeat, she officially crowns herself the most clumsy villainess alive. She apologizes for trying to serve a romantic snack and delivering blunt force trauma instead. The ultimate golden retriever just smiles, absolutely thrilled that she is perfectly safe. Our girl completely melts over her stupidly noble, unfairly handsome knight in shining armor. The incredibly romantic moment is instantly ruined by his stomach growling like a feral beast. The massive, deadly warrior immediately turns the color of a ripe tomato. She bursts out laughing, declaring his aggressive hunger an absolute culinary emergency. Slapping the handmade sandwiches onto the counter, Noah stares at them like a literal sacred treasure. She shyly admits her cooking skills are basically non-existent, desperately hoping he doesn't get food poisoning. Without even blinking, he seriously declares her culinary masterpiece to be absolute perfection. He aggressively praises the meal, entirely ignoring the fact that he hasn't taken a single bite. Giggling at his blind devotion, she completely surrenders to how hopelessly charming he is. She softly confesses how incredibly happy she is to have her favorite person back home. The love-struck bodyguard just stares at her, looking like he just won the absolute lottery. His heart basically does backflips as he quietly thanks his gorgeous lady. The two massive dorks spend the rest of the night happily existing in their cozy bubble. The next day, our queen is lounging on the sofa, doodling memories of her adorable kitchen date, just enjoying the rare, drama-free piece of this usually chaotic fantasy novel. That piece shatters when Linda the maid bursts into the room, practically vibrating with excitement. She loudly announces that the notoriously grumpy crown prince has formally requested a private dinner date. Inspecting the wax seal, our fake villainess assumes he finally wants to discuss their secret annulment. Linda aggressively squeals in delight, totally oblivious to the heartbroken knight currently eavesdropping from the hallway. The giddy maid notes that this level of royal romance is completely unheard of for Arthur. Sprinting off to summon the dressmaker, Linda completely ignores our girl's frantic attempts to cancel. Lurking in the shadows, poor Noah's absolute dream scenario is instantly crushed by royal reality. Staring at the empty doorway, she feels incredibly guilty for tricking this sweet, supportive staff. But she quickly rationalizes that a private royal dinner is actually the ultimate tactical advantage. It is the perfect opportunity to finally force that stubborn prince into signing the breakup papers. Meanwhile, across the city, the supposed ex-fiancé is currently having a massive internal panic attack. The observant royal butler gently asks why his golden boy is sweating like a nervous teenager. Staring down at a stunning diamond ring, Arthur quietly admits he is absolutely terrified. Meanwhile, back in his gloomy office, the crown prince is busy plotting some serious royal treason with his top advisor. He firmly orders Sir Magnus to recall the entire naval fleet and bring his sister back home. The captain nervously accepts the command, fully aware that hijacking a diplomatic convoy is an incredibly expensive political nightmare. Arthur bitterly regrets not going himself, noting he already dropped the massive bombshell that he is canceling his sister's arranged marriage. The Western Kingdom naturally threw an absolute fit, but he refuses to answer to anyone lower than the Emperor himself. Magnus connects the dangerous dots, asking if Arthur actually intends to march straight into the Empire's capital. The golden boy hits him with a dangerously cold stare, clarifying his grand entrance strategy. He vows to arrive not as a submissive prince-in-waiting, but as an absolute, undisputed king. Warning him about the furious royal council is totally useless, because Arthur is completely done playing nice. Once that heavy crown is finally on his head, those greedy old politicians won't have the power to stop him. Taking his seat at the mahogany desk, he declares it is officially time to take control of his own life. The loyal guard respectfully bows his head, strictly avoiding any outright treason. But dropping the formalities, he begs his friend to remember just how terrifyingly powerful the noble houses actually are. Going to war against families with endless resources could completely destroy everything Arthur is trying to build. With their terrifying web of connections, finding any allies brave enough to oppose the council is basically impossible. Arthur calmly acknowledges the massive risk, but notes there is one specific, ridiculously powerful duke who might actually help them. Securing the terrifying Aurelius family's loyalty is a massive headache for another day. Right now, their absolute priority is ensuring his supposedly toxic fiancé is kept perfectly safe. Switching gears to a much more romantic crisis, our girl is currently waiting to ambush her royal ex standing just a few feet away. Her fiercely devoted knight is absolutely radiating pure jealousy. His heart twists at the bitter reality that she got dressed up specifically to see that arrogant royal. He desperately tries to keep his composure, but his traitorous eyes refuse to look away. Because she looks absolutely, devastatingly gorgeous in her fancy evening gown, the massive, battle-hardened warrior is completely reduced to a blushing, flustered mess. He ruthlessly scolds himself for being such a pathetic, hopelessly love-struck fool. Mentally smacking his own forehead, he wonders when he lost all of his professional boundaries. He aggressively reminds his foolish heart that she technically still belongs to the future king. Gazing at her with this much blatant affection is a massive breach of his knightly honor. He vows to lock those dangerous, completely unrequited feelings deep inside a mental vault. But when he finally snaps out of his brooding spiral, the girl of his dreams is standing terrifyingly close. Noticing his heavy leather gloves, she completely destroys his sanity by directly feeding him a pastry, offering up the sweet treat with the most adorable, completely oblivious smile imaginable. The brooding giant secretly absolutely despises sugary food with every fiber of his being. But there is absolutely zero chance he is rejecting being hand-fed by his massive crush. Forcing the pastry down, his face physically twists in pure agony, making her panic that she just poisoned him. Frantically asking if it tastes weird, she completely misses the fact that the poor knight is currently short-circuiting over the intimacy. His soul fully exits his body when she casually pops the exact same half-eaten pastry straight into her mouth. He stares in utter disbelief at the accidental, incredibly casual indirect kiss. He genuinely wonders if this chaotic noblewoman is actively trying to stop his heart. Stripping off his heavy leather gloves, the protective bodyguard officially takes matters into his own hands. Spotting a smudge of cream on her face, he gently reaches out without a single second thought. Still completely oblivious, she cheerfully insists the dessert tasted perfectly fine to her. Her adorable rambling is instantly silenced when his warm thumb softly brushes across her bottom lip. She completely freezes like a deer in headlights, totally blindsided by the sudden, deeply romantic gesture. Staring down at her shocked expression, he fondly wonders how someone so elegant can be such a messy eater. But his hopelessly whipped brain immediately decides he loves every single chaotic thing she does anyway. An overwhelming, dangerously possessive urge to keep her strictly for himself floods his system. He is absolutely terrified of how much he actually wants her. Snapping back to reality, the panicked knight violently yanks his hand away like he just touched a hot stove. He immediately drops his gaze, frantically spitting out a formal apology for crossing the line, blaming his total lack of professional boundaries on a momentary, deeply embarrassing impulse. He desperately hopes his gorgeous boss doesn't fire him for blatantly touching her face. Proving she is the absolute best, she just giggles at her own clumsiness and sweetly thanks him for the help. Though internally, her heart is doing massive backflips over the sudden, swoon-worthy intimacy. The heavy romantic tension is instantly shattered by the loud, humiliating sound of his nervous hiccups returning. The massive warrior mentally screams in agony as his own body aggressively betrays his tough guy persona. Catching onto his tail, she ruthlessly teases him for being so adorably flustered, while he desperately tries to deny the accusations between hiccups. But their cute, bubbly little world is about to be violently interrupted by a very unwelcome guest. The crown prince is glaring daggers from across the room, absolutely seething at the sight of them flirting. Completely unaware of the incoming threat, our fake villainess is just happily giggling with her favorite guy. Staking his territorial claim, Arthur sneaks up from behind and aggressively presses a kiss right to her bare shoulder. She violently flinches away, completely horrified to find her toxic ex-fiancé invading her personal space. Pure panic takes over as she practically leaps backward to escape his unwanted royal affection. Her frantic retreat is immediately sabotaged when her heel catches the edge of her expensive gown. Gravity tries to claim her again, but the prince smoothly catches her waist before she hits the floor. He locks eyes with her, totally unfazed by her obvious disgust as he smugly pulls her back up. The arrogant royal drops an incredibly hollow, completely insincere apology for the ambush, claiming he never intended to startle his lovely betrothed so badly. But the deeply possessive glint in his eye tells an entirely different, highly manipulative story. Meanwhile, Noah's hand is hovering dangerously close to his sword hilt, entirely ready to commit high treason to protect her. Casually brushing past his creepy sneak attack, Arthur smoothly asks if she has been waiting long. Taking a massive step back, she firmly demands he keep his royal lips entirely to himself. He stammers out an awkward apology, completely baffled since his toxic ex used to beg for his affection. Meanwhile, Noah forces his hand off his sword hilt, desperately swallowing the urge to commit high treason. Our fake villainess breathes a tiny sigh of relief that the arrogant royal actually backed down. Switching to formal pleasantries, she politely notes how much healthier he is looking today. He smoothly credits his miraculous recovery entirely to her devoted bedside nursing. Keeping the momentum, Arthur formally requests a private tea date before their scheduled dinner, adding a very pointed, highly disrespectful glare directly at her massive bodyguard. He smoothly suggests she dismiss her loyal guard dog for the evening, arrogantly promising to personally escort her anywhere she desires within the palace walls. She reluctantly agrees to the private meeting, desperate to finally discuss their secret breakup. But before she can politely excuse Noah, the prince aggressively barks an order across the room. He rudely commands the massive warrior to immediately vacate the premises. The blatant disrespect practically drips from the future king's voice. Our girl mentally squares up, absolutely furious that this jerk is bossing around her personal staff. She immediately tries to intervene, but the arrogant royal completely talks over her. Before Arthur can drag her away, a dangerously deep, firm voice echoes through the hall. The crown prince completely freezes at the blatant, shocking defiance. Standing tall, Noah completely rejects the royal order with an icy, terrifyingly calm refusal. Arthur's fragile ego violently snaps at being openly challenged by a commoner. He arrogantly lists off his absolute authority over every single guard in the empire, pointing out that every soldier blindly obeys the crown, and every servant answers directly to the royal family, reminding the knight that absolutely nobody breathes in this palace without his direct permission. He fiercely demands to know who gave this lowly swordsman the right to defy a future king. Without missing a beat, Noah proudly declares his unwavering loyalty to Lady Lucia. He fiercely clarifies that he only takes orders from his actual boss. Completely immune to royal intimidation, he refuses to budge a single inch. Our girl instantly panics, terrified her sweet golden retriever is about to get executed for insubordination. Before Arthur can unleash his royal fury, she quickly steps between the two massive, glaring men. She gently orders her fiercely protective knight to stand down and follow the prince's stupid command, desperately assuring him that she is perfectly safe inside the heavily guarded palace. Noah just stares at her, his jaw completely locked in stubborn, silent protest. She gives him a desperate, pleading look, silently begging him not to start a literal war over a tea date. Reluctantly yielding to her absolute authority, he swallows his pride and respectfully bows his head. Watching her favorite person walk away completely shatters her heart. She absolutely despises letting this arrogant prince humiliate her incredibly devoted knight. But keeping Noah alive is infinitely more important than winning a petty argument. Vowing to end this miserable charade immediately so nobody else gets hurt. Turning back to the prince, she drops the polite act entirely and demands answers. She aggressively asks why he hasn't publicly announced their cancelled engagement yet. Arthur opens his mouth, fully prepared to deliver a massive, complicated political speech. But the words completely die in his throat the second he actually looks at her. He is completely mesmerized by how devastatingly beautiful she looks in the candlelight. His royal brain absolutely short-circuits, leaving him staring like a total idiot. The heavy, awkward silence stretches out across the room, until he completely loses his mind and blurts out a massive, unprompted compliment. He instantly realizes his mistake, looking just as shocked as our completely bewildered girl. Frantically avoiding eye contact, he stammers out a pathetic apology for the sudden romantic outburst. He practically sprints to the other side of the room, desperately needing a minute to recover. She just stands there, utterly confused by this massive, totally uncharacteristic personality shift. Her toxic ex acting like a blushing, flustered teenager is genuinely terrifying. Facing the wall, the emotionally constipated prince desperately tries to regulate his racing heart. He violently scolds himself for acting like a lovesick fool right in the middle of a serious negotiation, frantically wondering why his pulse is currently doing massive backflips. He forcefully reminds himself that this entire desperate plan is strictly to protect his little sister and the kingdom. So why is he completely losing his composure over the girl he supposedly hates? Cautiously approaching the spiraling royal, she gently asks if he is having another breakdown. Turning back around, he solemnly promises to explain his highly suspicious recent behavior. He dives into a tragic monologue about carrying the crushing weight of the entire empire since birth. admitting that every single choice in his entire life was forcefully dictated by the royal council, including the absolute nightmare of being engaged to the notoriously toxic Lady Aurelius. He bitterly clarifies that he never actually wanted to marry her in the first place, reassuring her that picking a toxic villainess as his queen was definitely not his choice. So when she suddenly marched into his office and demanded a breakup, he felt a massive, overwhelming wave of pure, absolute freedom for the first time in his life. But that brief moment of happiness was instantly crushed by a massive reality check. The crushing guilt of his own selfish relief completely destroyed him. He drops to his knees right in front of his stunned, completely bewildered ex. He confesses that by escaping his own political nightmare, he doomed his little sister to the exact same fate. Begging for her help, he admits he desperately needs her to change the future. She gently praises him for finally standing up to protect his family, genuinely proud that he is fighting back against the corrupt royal system. But she remains completely confused about how a fake villainess can solve a massive diplomatic crisis. Instead of answering, he slowly slides a gorgeous, incredibly expensive bracelet right across the table. Pressing a desperate kiss to her hand, he leaves her totally lost in this chaotic romantic gesture. He practically begs her to stay right by his side, completely ignoring their signed annulment with a desperate, pleading whisper. Dropping all his royal pride, he desperately begs her not to leave him. He asks the one person who finally gave him freedom to stay trapped with him, asking her to officially stand by his side against the entire empire, leaving our completely speechless girl staring down at her toxic ex who is literally begging to marry her. And that's the end for today's recap. If you had fun, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps the recaps coming. Choose your next binge. At the top is a crowd pleaser, and the bottom is the latest chaos drop. Thanks for watching. Stay comfy, keep your popcorn ready, and I'll see you in the next one.